The blue-eyed blonde man with long hair pulled back into a low ponytail hugged Sally from behind with his right arm and called her name. His head was right next to hers, and the man tenderly confessed to Sally that he never thought he could truly love anyone. Then he turned the girl to face him, and their faces were so close to each other that their noses were practically touching, and the man admitted that he did not understand why Sally did not leave his head. Sally looked at the man with surprise with her scarlet eyes, and he ordered her not to run away from him any more. The man looked at Sally intently and noted that if she ran away again, he didn't know what he would do. The man who told Sally all this was the Emperor's brother and the best swordsman in the Empire. Archduke Venelucia Afron was a young man with blue eyes and long blonde hair, and the main character of this novel. And Sally was a pathetic villain who was abandoned by her lover, and her name was Selina Daphne, and she didn't even get a couple of lines in the novel. Sally was a young girl with short lilac hair who, in a normal situation, should not have gotten along with the main characters. Sienna looked at the Archduke and said that she was not running away. As she extended her hand towards Afron's, Sally thought that no matter what it took, she had to achieve his true love. Sally took too long to get Afron to fall in love with her, not the main character. Sally and Afron stood and hugged each other, and the girl thought only about how only thanks to his love she would be able to get out of this terrible romance and survive. One day, when the girl opened her eyes, she found herself in a romantic fantasy called Thorns of Chlorochaeon. The novel tells the story of love that blossomed against the backdrop of the 11-year war that broke out between the main characters, Archduke Venelucia and the main heroine, Lucalina. Our heroine was reborn as Selenia Daphne, a pathetic villainess rejected by the Archduke. But the most important thing was that Selenia Daphne was destined for a tragic ending, unlike the main characters, but our heroine was happier than ever on the day of her rebirth in their family estate. Sally's parents looked at the little girl who had just been born and was sleeping in her crib and could not believe how beautiful she was, so they considered her a real gift from fate. The girl grew up in a loving family and enjoyed a quiet life. It seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble when she took her first steps in this world. Sally decided to live her happy life away from the main characters, promising her father that she would become the same great ruler of the lands as he was. The daughter of the Daphne family decided that she was given a second chance, so she decided to live her life to the fullest and avoid contact with the main characters, until the knights burst through the door with an order from His Majesty. Until that day, Sienna believed that her happy life would last forever, but the moment her afternoon tea was interrupted by 3 of the Emperor's envoys, her dreams were shattered. The father covered Sally with his back and asked the knights the reason why the Emperor was looking for his daughter, but the man replied that he did not know, but was only following orders. Sally did not understand why the Emperor needed her, but she could not refuse, so the girl went with the knights to the palace in the capital. The girl and the knight stopped at the door, where 2 servants barred their way with swords, and the knight warned Sally not to dare utter a word until His Majesty addressed her. The Emperor sat on his throne, and Sally looked at him through the swords of the servants, which were crossed to block her way. Sally knelt down and, as required by palace etiquette, stated her name and greeted the son of the great empire. The Emperor did not answer, but silently looked at the girl, rubbing his chin. Then the Emperor turned to Celia Daphne and asked if the girl was a time traveller. Sally didn't expect to hear such a question, so she was very surprised and asked what exactly the Emperor meant. The Emperor looked at the girl with arrogance. He ignored the girl's question and repeated it, but this time with the assertion that she was a time traveller, which means she knows what the Chlorochaeon thorns are. The thorns of Chlorochaeon are those who have broken the chain of cause and effect, and they also have extraordinary abilities due to reincarnation or being transported to another world. But the main thing was that they possessed the power that was capable of overthrowing even the Emperor himself. The Emperor then said that he had been watching Celia for several years, and noticed that the girl was not following her predetermined destiny. At that moment, it was as if an electric shock had struck Sally, only now did she realize that she had deviated greatly from the plot of the novel. According to the plot of the novel, Sally should have long ago fallen in unrequited love with the main character, Archduke Venelucci. Moreover, she should have humiliated herself before him like a fool, but the girl had never even seen him before today. Sienna didn't understand how the Emperor knew about the Chlorochaean thorns because it wasn't even in the plot of the novel. The Emperor noticed that the girl was silent, so he addressed Celia Daphne by name, which attracted attention. He told the girl that, based on her silence, he had come to the conclusion that he was right in his arguments. Then the Emperor confessed that he was a thorn of Chlorochaean, and therefore he could not stand the time travelers, considering them a threat to his position. At that moment, Sally realized that she had fallen into the trap of Clifford Helios, a cruel and domineering emperor who was so obsessed with power that he destroyed all of his relatives except Archduke Venelucius. He also courted the thorns of Chlorochaean because he saw them as a threat to his hold on the throne. Having realized all this, Sally began to worry and be concerned about what would happen to her now that the Emperor found out that the girl was a time traveler. Sally was overcome with horror and began to imagine pictures of her imminent death at the hands of the Emperor. Sally thought that it would be a miracle if only she died, because the Emperor could kill her parents too, so she told herself that she had to figure out how to stop the Emperor. The girl decided that she had to come up with something that would help her please the Emperor. And the girl remembered that the novel described the Emperor's weakness, which could perhaps help her. The Emperor feared that his only relative, Archduke Venelucia, would one day want to take his place. Venelucia was the only one who could challenge the Emperor. When the Emperor began to put pressure on Archduke Venelucia, the main character, Lucalina, tried to protect him, but was exiled to the front. After that incident, the Archduke, while waiting for Lucalina, began to deliberately meet with ordinary noblewomen so that the Emperor would not see him as a threat. Eventually, after Lucalina returned from the front, they, together with the Archduke, overthrew the Emperor. Sally came up with a plan and asked the Emperor to give her some time. The Emperor noticed how the girl was trembling and began to watch Selenia Daphne with interest after her words. Sally said that she would make the Archduke love her, and then she would give a gift to the Emperor that would allow the son of the Empire to make the Archduke his obedient puppet. The girl's promise made the Emperor think, but he did not show it at all with his appearance, but continued to keep a straight face. He looked at the thorn of Chlorochaean, who stood before him on one knee, his head lowered to the floor, and said that he was interested. He then added that making the Archduke and making him fall in love with him would not be as easy as Sally thought. The Emperor said that, unlike the others, Selenia Daphne does not know the true face of Archduke Venelucius. And then he reminded about Lucalina and asked if the daughter of the Daphne family could surpass the main character. Although the fact that Lucalina is now at the front and their friendly relationship has not yet developed into love, plays into Sally's hands. In the end, the Emperor wished Selenia Daphne good luck and expressed his hopes that the girl could become Venelucci's true lover. Thus, Sally realized that she herself had fallen into the trap of the dangerous Emperor. After this incident, Sally, like a madwoman, began to study everything connected with the Archduke of Venelucia down to the smallest detail. She studied his prejudices, habits, favorite perfumes, music, food, books, as well as his daily life and the places he frequented. Sally's parents were surprised by her sudden change, but the girl could do nothing as she desperately clung to life. And finally, one day at a ball, the very incident for which the girl had been preparing so diligently occurred. The Archduke approached Sally and extended his palm to her and addressed the girl, calling her Milady. Their first meeting took place at a masquerade ball, where Archduke Venelucia asked Sally to do him the honour of dancing with him. Sally was glad that she finally had her chance, so she decided that she would not miss it at any cost. The daughter of the Daphne family extended her hand and covered the Archduke's palm with it, and then agreed to his invitation to dance. That evening, Venelucia and Selenia danced for the first time, and the daughter of the Daphne family, without wasting a second, went on the offensive. While they were talking, Sally was adjusting to every word Venelucci said, and then the couple found themselves alone on the balcony. Venelucia and Selenia even kissed when they were left on the balcony. At that moment, the girl even thought that if everything continued in the same spirit, she would be able to avoid the worst outcome. However, Sally became a hostage to her own illusions. 6 years later, it was a sunny summer day in the mansion of Archduke Venelucci Afron, which was located in the capital. Sally was sitting at the tea table and reading a book, when suddenly someone called her by her cute nickname, Sally, and asked if the girl was busy. The man gently touched the book with his fingers, which the girl was holding, and told Sally to stop reading and rather go for a walk with him. Venelucia looked at Sally with a loving gaze and told his beloved that he had found a place that she would definitely like. 6 years have passed since Sally found herself next to Venelucia, and during this time their relationship has turned into something more, into a true love that no one doubted anymore. Sally was happy because now her life and the lives of her family were safe. The only thing left for Sally to do was to maintain their relationship, so the girl smiled with all her heart and agreed to go for a walk with Venelucia. Venelucia and Sally got into the carriage and left the mansion in an unknown direction. Already in the carriage, Venelucia confessed to Sally that today they would go to a salon that the girl would definitely like. Venelucia told Sally that his old friend Luna also liked this salon, and these words made the girl tense up a little. Sally became sad because she realized that under the nickname Luna Venelucia meant Lukalina Elihan. Lukalina Elihan is the main character, with whom Archduke Venelucia should be, whom he had not remembered for the last 6 years. So Sally did not understand why he suddenly remembered her. The Archduke said that he would choose a dress for Sally that seemed to be created in the image of her smile, because when his beloved smiles, his heart smiles with him. These words calmed Sally down, and the girl reminded herself that there was no need to worry, since they had been dating for 6 years. Sally decided that the plot had long been changed, so even if the main character appeared, nothing terrible would happen. Daphne stood in front of the mirror in a new dress that the Archduke, sitting on a chair next to her, had picked out for her, and next to her stood 2 store employees who were showering her with compliments. The Archduke smiled and told Sally that she looked very beautiful in that dress. The daughter of the Daphne family was glad to receive a compliment from her lover, so she thanked Venelucci for his words. While one employee was adjusting Daphne's dress, the second showed the girl a white dress and added that the Archduke had chosen it, especially for his beloved, and asked her to try it on. The dress that the Archduke had chosen for her seemed familiar to the girl. Sally tried on the dress, but what she saw in the mirror upset the girl. As soon as Sally saw this white dress, she immediately remembered the girl with bright silver hair, namely the main character of the novel, Lukalina. The girl touched her reflection with her hand and realized that her premonition had not deceived her. Now Sally was sure that the Archduke's heart still belonged to the novel's main character, so much so that even in his dress he projected her image. Sally began to doubt that she had achieved anything in these 6 years, because in the original novel, Venelucia specifically dated many girls, and Sally could very well be just one of them. Sally thought with pain that even after 6 years, she had not been able to erase even the shadow of Lukalina. Sally clenched her fists and began to fear that after Lukalina returned from the front, the novel would return to its original plot. If this happens and all of Sally's efforts are in vain, then the Emperor will get rid of the girl, considering her useless. The frightened Sally tried to pull herself together, telling herself to calm down and reminding herself that she still had time. Back home, Sally decided to develop a different strategy. Above all, Sally must always follow the Archduke and become closer to him than his family and friends, so that her presence near him becomes a matter of course, as natural as breathing. Sienna poured coffee and thought that one day, when he got completely used to it and decided to look around trying to find her, Sally would no longer be there. In the novel, Lukalina disappeared for only a year, and it was hard for him. Sally still has enough time for her to become a part of his life. Sally picked up the bell and rang it to call the servants. A maid entered the room, and Sally told her that from today on, she would bring the Archduke coffee, which the daughter of the Daphne family would personally prepare for him. The maid confessed to her mistress that she had something to tell her, namely that she had heard some rumours about the Archduke of Venelucia. Daphne accepted Lady Nominante's invitation and came to her house for tea, where the hostess personally came out and met Selly in the garden. The maid helped Daphne sit down at the table, where there was already tea and 4 cups, although the seats next to her were empty. 2 ladies at the next table began to discuss the fact that Lady Daphne had come alone to tea. Daphne sat at the table with a mug of tea and pretended not to hear how the same girls were discussing how the rumours were probably true, and Archduke Venelucia had started dating someone else, although they thought that this couple was serious. Sienna thought sadly that misfortunes never come alone, because as soon as she felt the Archduke's alienation, he immediately began dating someone else. Selly was lost in her thoughts about what she had been expecting when she was brought back to reality by the exclamations of the girls who were calling her to look there. Selly looked at the entrance and saw something she didn't expect at all. The Archduke arrived at the tea party arm in arm with his new partner right in front of all the tea party participants. At the entrance, Venelucia and his partner were met by the hostess of the tea party, Lady Nominante. All the girls who were watching the newly arrived couple began to feel sorry for Lady Daphne, and Selly couldn't take her eyes off them. Selly was surprised and felt unpleasant from the words of the girls who were discussing the fact that there was no girl in the empire capable of conquering the Archduke. Daphne was speechless. Her hand that held the mug jerked, but she managed to hold on to the glass of liquid. The Archduke and his new companion sat down at another table, and a girl approached them and thanked Venelucci for accepting his invitation. The lady sat down at the same table with them and noted that today he had come to tea with Milady Erdella, with whom he looked very good together. The other girls at the event began to regret that Lady Daphne was alone, since she had long since passed the age when it was customary to get married. The girls exclaimed sharply and told them to look at Milady Daphne, causing Venelucia to look around curiously. Selly sat quietly and smiled. She had clearly decided that no matter how long it took, he would not escape. Archduke Venelucia was deeply shocked by Daphne's reaction because he expected to see tears, a scandal, or anything else, but not a smile on Selly's face. Night had fallen in Viscount Daphne's townhouse, but lights were still burning in 2 windows on the ground floor. Selly looked out the window of her family home onto the street and dispassionately watched what was happening. Archduke Venelucia knocked with all his might on the front door of the townhouse, shouting whether Selly was there. The maid approached Sella's room and, with a doubtful voice, reported that the Archduke had arrived and asked what the lady would order. The daughter of the Daphne family turned from the window and looked at the maid, who said that the Archduke returned to the estate and saw that Selly had collected all her things and returned to her family home. Selly told the maid that they could not keep the Archduke waiting outside, so they should take him to the reception room. A mug of tea was standing in front of the Archduke when Selly entered the room and apologized to Venelucia for keeping him waiting, as the girl had to tidy herself up. Archduke Venelucia got straight to the point and asked why the girl had packed her things and left his mansion today. Venelucia started to say that if this was all because she was angry that he brought another partner today, but he didn't finish the sentence because Selly interrupted him. Selly hastened to say that she had no right to be angry with his lordship for bringing the girl he wanted, for that would be inappropriate on her part. Selly said they looked good together. The daughter of the Daphne family admitted that for the entire 6 years that they were together, she felt like she was a hindrance to his lordship. So when she saw someone who suited him much better, Selenia realized that she had to give way. Venelucia looked like he felt sorry for Selly, so he gently called the girl by her nickname and asked her not to talk like that. The Archduke admitted that he had acted impolitely, but there was a reason for it that he could not yet name. Selly smiled, lowered her head, and thanked Venelucci for allowing the girl to know what warm love was. Selenia Daphne informed Archduke Venelucia that it was time for them to part, which hurt the man's feelings. The Archduke exhaled, and then said that now he understood why Selly behaved the way she did. Venelucia gave Selly gifts many times, but the girl never took them home for herself, but simply left them at the estate, so the Archduke asked his beloved whether she had been preparing for the past 6 years to leave him. Selly hastened to reply that of course not, it was just that his lordship's gifts were too valuable for her, so the daughter of the Daphne family did not dare to take them. Venelucia asked if Selly was sure of her decision, since he never returned to those with whom he had broken up. Selly said that she had been with him long enough to know everything perfectly well and promised not to bother the Archduke. Venelucia was silent for a moment and then noted that Selly had already decided everything for herself. The Archduke stood up with an unpleasant feeling inside and told Selly that he would go. Selly Daphne remained seated in her place, but placed her hand over her heart and with a smile on her face said goodbye to his lordship. Archduke Venelucia left the room, and Selly did not even turn her head to watch him go. Selly clearly understood that she had to endure, because it was necessary for a new flower to bloom. If the gods are still favourable to Selly, then the chance will definitely appear again, but for now their 6-year relationship is over. A week later, Venelucia was practicing fencing with his knight. The fencing partner noted that his lordship had not been looking well lately, so he asked what was wrong. Venelucia addressed his knight by name and noted that Hamilton still had the strength to look at his face during the duel. After this, Archduke Venelucia delivered a sharp and precise blow, which defeated his opponent, who dared to think about something else during the duel. The defeated opponent's sword fell to the ground right at the feet of its defeated owner. Archduke Venelucia put his sword to the throat of Hamilton, who was kneeling before his lordship, and said that if the knight was distracted during sparring, then next time it would not be the sword that would fly, but his head. The Archduke angrily asked if Hamilton had forgotten how dangerous the battlefield was. The knight did not dare to argue with his lordship. He quickly realized his mistake and then apologized and promised to improve. And Venelucia ordered Hamilton to do double the amount of training. Venelucia returned from sparring with his fists clenched, and it seemed he looked angrier than usual. His lordship stopped abruptly and swore. He was angry and couldn't believe that others noticed that he looked so bad. Venelucia grabbed his head with his hand and found it funny that he looked like that just because of the woman who left him. He decided that he had enough, because if you are tired because of insomnia, then it is enough to drink coffee. At the estate of Archduke Venelucci, an ordinary sunny day seemed to bring less warmth than before. Archduke Venelucia abruptly put his cup back in the saucer and seemed angry. His lordship noted with displeasure that the taste of the coffee had changed and asked how the servants looked after the beans. The butler told Venelucia that the beans were well looked after and were fine, but the method of preparing the coffee had changed. The butler said that when young Mrs. Daphne was here, she personally brewed the coffee and they preserved it with the help of magic, only that coffee ran out. Venelucia turned to his servant and asked why they didn't just brew the coffee the same way. The butler said that Lady Daphne used the method of brewing coffee with cold water, and the servants did not have time to adopt it. Archduke Venelucia was very angry that he heard about Selly too often. Venelucia hit the table with all her might with her fist and asked the butler with anger in his voice how much time had passed since she left, and they still couldn't even make coffee properly. The Archduke's patience ran out and he sent his butler out of the office. Venelucia did not understand what was happening to him, and when it all began, because he did not even notice how the one who was supposed to become a simple cover for the emperor, and with whom parting should not have been difficult at all, became a part of his daily life. He remembered the image of Sella smiling tenderly at him, and telling him that her love for him would never change. And he understood that now, without her, everything had changed. He slammed his cup down on the saucer and ordered himself to pull himself together, because even if he had feelings for Selly, he certainly couldn't get close to her. Because if the emperor found out about it, the girl would be in danger. Venelucia understood that the situation was as bad as it could be, but he still couldn't miss today's imperial banquet. The imperial banquet began, which took place in a huge hall. All the ladies at the banquet discussed only the fact that Archduke Venelucia came alone, without a partner. Everyone was only discussing the fact that Lady Daphne was unlikely to come to the banquet alone, and that after that incident at the tea party, the couple had truly broken up. Venelucia, who heard all these conversations, stood aside and thought that this was precisely why he did not want to come, but suddenly someone exclaimed and called everyone to look away. All the ladies looked with admiration and could not believe what they saw. Milady Daphne entered the banquet hall and attracted everyone's attention and admiration. But the most surprising thing was that Milady Daphne arrived accompanied by the heir of the Pendragon family. Venelucia couldn't believe what he saw when he saw Selly with another man, and it hurt him. All the guests at the imperial banquet watched as Milady Daphne entered arm in arm with another man. Rumours began to circulate around the hall that the Archduke had come to tea last time in the company of another lady, and now Mrs. Daphne, with her behaviour, was showing that the couple had really broken up. Venelucia couldn't stay away and decided to approach the most talked-about couple of the evening. The Archduke walked up to his ex-girlfriend, then extended his hand to her and called her by name. The heir of the Pendragon family intervened in the conversation, greeting Venelucia and introducing his partner, Lady Daphne. Archduke Venelucia ignored the heir of the Pendragon family and turned to Selly. He walked past Selly's companion and asked his former lover to go with him. Selly picked up the hem of her dress and then politely, as is proper etiquette in high society, apologized to the Archduke of Venelucia. Mrs. Daphne noted that she had come today as the partner of the heir of the Pendragon family, so she could not leave him alone, but if his lordship had anything to say, he could do it here. Archduke Venelucia did not expect to be rejected by Selly, as the girl had always been on his side. Venelucia was clearly not used to being refused, so he abruptly grabbed Selly by her hand. The heir of the Pendragon family was very surprised that the Archduke had grabbed his partner and did not know what to do, so he simply stood there in bewilderment. Archduke Venelucia announced that he was taking Selly away and pulled her by the hand behind him, leaving the heir of the Pendragon family to watch their retreating backs. Archduke Venelucia took Selly to his restroom and said that he did not understand her at all. Venelucia was still holding Selly's hand and was expressing his indignation to her, asking why she had come today with that guy and whether her goal was to provoke him. Selly looked at her former lover with indifference and said that she had not planned to provoke him at all. Venelucia asked why Selly had come today with the heir of the Pendragon family and whether it was definitely not because of that incident at the tea party. The Archduke was angry and said that if she was doing this because she thought he was close to Lady Lumina, then it was not so. Selly interrupted him and said that it was not so, but if it were true, the girl was in no position to comment on his lordship. Hearing this phrase, Venelucia, out of anger, grabbed the girl's hand tighter and asked why Selly was drawing a line between them. Venelucia grabbed the girl's hand too hard, causing Selly to cry out in pain. The Archduke did this by accident, so he became afraid that Selly was hurt and asked her for forgiveness. Then he told his ex-lover to wait, and with his free hand reached behind his back, trying to get something. The Archduke took out a bottle of red liquid that looked like medicine. Seeing the medicine, Selly realized that this was the very potion that could revive even the dead. Milady Daphne noted that it was too generous to spend such an important potion on a person with whom the Archduke had parted. And besides, she was not so badly hurt. But Venelucia said that it did not matter now. Venelucia opened the bottle and poured the potion onto Selly's hand, telling her to consider it an expression of his regret. Selly looked at the Archduke and wondered to herself that Venelucia had reacted faster than she had expected, and whether that meant she had been lucky. Selly wanted to immediately throw herself into the arms of the Archduke and be convinced of his love, but in the end she decided that it was too early. Selly abruptly pulled her hand out of Veneluci's, which the man had been holding all this time. Selly looked at her former lover impassively and then boldly told him that his lordship need not worry about her anymore. The daughter of the Daphne family turned around and said that it was time for her to go, as the heir of the Pendragon family was waiting for her. Archduke Venelucia could not let go of Selly and grabbed her hand again, but this time very gently and carefully. Venelucia said he wanted to talk to Selly about her desire to marry him. Hearing the words about marriage, Selly was surprised, and then the girl turned around and looked at Archduke Veneluci. Selly began to hope that her goal would be achieved, and she would be able to survive, escaping death at the hands of the dangerous emperor. In Sally's eyes stood the image of the emperor in blood. She asked herself what the girl was doing. Why didn't she agree as soon as possible? She wanted it so much. But Sally snatched her hand away and reminded the Archduke that he already had a loved one. Hearing these words, Veneluccia was very surprised, as he expected to hear completely different words from Sally. Although Sally did not name the name, she was sure that the Archduke would understand that Milady Daphne had met Lukalina Elihan, with whom he had been close since childhood. Lukalina was the only one who stood up for him when the Emperor planned to send the Archduke to war, which is why he has now been paying for it with 11 years of service on the battlefield, so Veneluccia will feel indebted to her for the rest of his life. Sally knew she shouldn't say it, but she still told Veneluccia straight out that she knew about his love for his childhood friend. But the 6 years that Sally lived with the Archduke erased the old fear, and in their place other feelings were born in her heart. The Archduke pulled himself together and addressed Sally tenderly by name, and said that if he loved Luna, then why would he have dated her for 6 years? Sally understood that all this time Veneluccia was trying to protect Luna from the Emperor, but the girl could not say it out loud. Sally was too upset and afraid to say something that she couldn't fix later, so she decided to go back to the banquet and collect her thoughts. Sally, with a sad expression on her face, apologized for her inappropriate words, and then turned around and said that she would return to the hall with his permission. Veneluccia was afraid of losing Sally, so he told her to stop and that if she wanted this fucking wedding so badly, then he was ready to do it. He was about to add that he wanted to tell her, but he didn't have time to finish the sentence because Sally interrupted him. Sally couldn't believe what she heard and became very angry. She turned to the Archduke and asked again if she heard him correctly when he said the phrase, "Let's play this damn wedding." Sally has been bending over backwards for the last 6 years just for Archduke Venelucci, and this is how he treats her. Sally felt that all her efforts had been wasted, so she angrily reproached his lordship for not knowing. But for Sally, marriage was not just a formality. But because of his careless attitude towards marriage, Sally would rather marry the first man she meets than become Venelucci's wife. These words touched the Archduke very deeply. He even lost the power of speech and could not believe that it was not just anyone who said this out loud, but Sally. Sally returned to Daphne's family home and thought that for the first time in 6 years, she had splashed out her true feelings on Veneluccia. Instead of relief, Sally felt a sense of regret and asked herself over and over again why she had done it. The daughter of the Daphne family could not get the sad expression on the Archduke's face that appeared after the girl's words out of her head, and Sally was also afraid that Veneluccia would reject her. She was also very worried about the Emperor's words that she heard from him 2 days ago. That day, the maid informed Sally that she had a guest who turned out to be none other than the Emperor. The Emperor removed the hood from his head and greeted Milady Daphne with the words that they had not seen each other for a long time. The daughter of the Daphne family fell to her knees and bowed low, greeting His Imperial Majesty. The Emperor sat down on a chair and then said with a smile that he was glad that the girl had not forgotten him after all. Sally was shaking all over with fear. She was afraid that the Emperor had come to kill her. The Emperor asked Sally if the girl remembered that there was only a year left until Lukalina's return. The daughter of the Daphne family immediately understood that with these words, the Emperor was warning Sally. The Emperor warned Sally that if Lukalina returned and made the Archduke fall in love with her again, the reprieve given to her would end, meaning Sally would have no more than 1 year to live. Sally, who was still shaking with fear, told the Emperor that this separation was part of her plan to win the heart of his lordship, and promised that she would completely conquer the heart of Venelucius before Lukalina arrived. The Emperor replied that he knew about this part of her plan, but he came to offer the girl to make this plan even more perfect, and to come to the upcoming imperial ball with the heir of the Pendragon family. In high society, it was well known that the young Earl Pendragon and His Grace the Archduke were sworn enemies. Sally plucked up her courage and looked at the Emperor, then asked if this was being done to make the Archduke jealous. At these words, the emperor began to pretend to cough in order to attract the girl's attention. Then the emperor looked arrogantly at the daughter of the Daphne family and with a smirk on his face noted that during the time that they had not seen each other, the girl had grown bolder and was now even objecting to him. The daughter of the Daphne family abruptly lowered her head to the floor and asked for forgiveness for her willfulness just once. The emperor was pleased with Milady Daphne's behavior, so he began to smile and noted that it was even surprising. The emperor rose from his chair and said that if anyone else had objected to him, he would have cut off his head on the spot, but it was so strange that with Milady Daphne everything was different. The emperor approached the girl and took her chin in his hand, lifting the girl's head up. He looked straight into the eyes of a frightened Sally and admitted that he had never thought that the girl could cope so well. The emperor admitted that despite her fragile appearance, the daughter of the Daphne family has patience as strong as steel, which reminds His Majesty of a well-sharpened blade. The emperor looked at Sally with a smile and admitted that he was even sorry to give the girl to Venelucia. What the emperor said told Sally that if she failed the mission with Venelucci, the emperor would torment the girl for the rest of her life. Sally could barely contain herself. It seemed like the girl was even crying because she understood that the emperor could make her empress in the future. The emperor had included in his words a warning that he would keep her, the Thorn of Chloriked, close by, watching, using, breaking and tormenting the girl as he saw fit for his own pleasure, since for him she would be a convenient tool. Sally was very scared of her possible future, so she decided that she would definitely win Venelucci's love. The daughter of the Daphne family promised the emperor that she would never fail. The emperor, with a smirk on his face, noted that the girl was saying this with such a serious face that he felt a little offended, because he had just kindly suggested to the daughter of the Daphne family that there was another way to survive even if she failed. The emperor crossed his arms over his chest and said that today he would trust the daughter of the Daphne family and leave. After finishing recalling her last meeting with the emperor, Sally began to feel sick, afraid that His Highness would find out about today's conversation between her and the Archduke. She again imagined the emperor telling the girl that he had no use for a toy that couldn't do its job properly. Sally was in a panic attack. She was nauseous, she couldn't breathe, and her condition was getting worse. The door of the room opened and a maid entered, who reminded the mistress that it was already late and time to go to bed. The maid saw Sally lying unconscious on the floor and ran to her mistress screaming in the hope of waking the girl. Sally began to come to her senses and opened her eyes slightly. A familiar voice tenderly asked if Sally was awake, which caused the girl to finally wake up and be very surprised. His lordship sat right next to Sally and asked with love in his voice how the girl was feeling. Sally turned her head away from Venelucci and asked why he had come, but the Archduke objected and said that he could not help but come when he learned that she had lost consciousness. The Archduke looked at his former lover with concern and asked himself what had happened to Sally. The maid of Daphne's house was unable to call a priest, so she turned to Archduke Venelucia for help. When Venelucia heard that Sally had fainted, he became very afraid for her and immediately went to her aid. Sally's condition turned out to be more serious than Venelucia imagined, as the girl fainted due to severe stress and regular panic attacks. When Venelucia saw Sally suffering from her illness, only then did he realize that he wanted to protect her, putting everything he had on the line. The Archduke lifted the blanket higher and covered Sally more warmly, and then added with tenderness in his voice that the priest had said before leaving that she needed to rest. He would be nearby so the girl could sleep peacefully. Sally did not answer the Archduke, but only asked herself whether Venelucia had really come running as soon as he heard that she had fainted. The moment Sally heard these words, she imagined herself and Venelucia happily relaxing in the garden, and she also thought that instead of thinking that she would be able to take a short break from the Emperor, she felt relief that 6 years of effort had not been in vain. Someone knocked sharply on the door of the room and called His Highness, but the Archduke did not answer and turned back to Sally. The knocking on the room intensified and the voice became louder. The knight Venelucia shouted that he had an urgent message for the Archduke. Venelucia didn't even blink an eye. He said that he was very busy and ordered the knight to leave. The knight did not give up, but immediately got down to business and reported that Lady Elihan had returned. Selina and Venelucia were both surprised by this news, but remained motionless. Selly's hands began to shake. She didn't understand why Lukalina had already returned, since she still had a year left. Selly suggested that perhaps Lukalina's early return was due to the fact that the Seven's daughter Daphne had altered the original novel. Selly began to feel afraid again because she didn't know what to do now, because history could return to the original. Selly once again imagined the arrogant look of the Emperor, who stood in blood and called the girl useless because she was unable to cope with her role. Selly was scared to death again and decided that she had to stop it. The Archduke was surprised to hear that Lady Elihan had returned, so he said Lukalina's name out loud. Hearing her name, Selly told his lordship to go. The daughter of the Daphne family turned to Venelucia and said that Lukalina was the one the Archduke was waiting for, so he should not worry about Selly and go to Lady Elihan calmly. Venelucia put his hand on Selly's shoulder and called her name to say something, but Selly turned her head away from him and did not let him finish his sentence, and then thanked him for the Archduke coming today and said that she needed to rest a little more. Venelucia didn't understand what he should do, so the man just clenched his fists, trying to pull himself together. The Archduke said he would return later, then turned and walked towards the exit, leaving Selly sitting on her bed with her head down. Selly knew there was nothing she could do, especially now that the original plot was changing and she needed to prepare for what to do next. The Archduke felt a great debt to Lukalina, who had been banished to the outskirts due to the Emperor's hatred after she sided with Venelucius, so he could not help but go. But the daughter of the Daphne family could not understand why Lukalina Elihan returned a year earlier than in the original. With the image of Venelucci in front of her eyes, Selly decided to remember all the changes to the original story to this day. If there is a difference from the book that Selly read in her past life, it is that the Emperor found out about her existence, and even that she is a thorn of Chlorochaeon, which is why she became the Emperor's puppet and is forced to make the Archduke fall in love with her. It turns out that the future changed because Selly acted differently than in the original. The thought that every time Selly fought for her life, it became the shortest path to her death, brought the girl into complete horror. The Archduke returned to his estate, which stood out for its green colour. The Archduke stood in one place near the wall and was completely immersed in his thoughts. All this time his thoughts were devoted to Selly, and he thought sadly that in the 6 years that they had been lovers, they had become quite close. He remembered how good it felt when Selly woke him up with a cup of aromatic coffee in the morning. He thought that the stronger his relationship with Selly, the more suspicious the Emperor would be, so he came to the tea party accompanied by another lady. Venelucia remembered that fateful day after which the path to Selly's heart was closed to him forever. He returned to the devastated and sad expression on Selly's face and began to blame himself for not thinking earlier that this action would hurt his beloved, who did not know the reasons for his actions. A knight entered the room and informed his lordship that the carriage was ready, which brought Venelucia back to reality. Venelucia noted that his thoughts were currently confused, but he needed to go to Lukalina quickly. The Archduke understood that Lukalina was the one who was sent to the battlefield only because the girl stood by his side right in front of the Emperor. The Archduke's carriage reached the central gate of the Elihan family estate. The horse stopped right in front of the entrance to the house, and Archduke Venelucia stepped out of the carriage. Venelucia entered the house and greeted Madame, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. Archduke Venelucia was met and officially greeted by his mother, Lady Elihan Lukalina. Venelucia noted that Madame must have suffered a lot all this time, and the blame lies entirely with him. Lukalina's mother objected to the Archduke, reminding him that all this time, while her daughter was away from the capital, His Highness had taken care of their family tirelessly. Madame Elihan then noted that her daughter had gone to the battlefield only to protect her own interests, so his lordship should not worry. Archduke Venelucia thanked Marquise Elihan and thought that her character remained the same. After the death of Marquis Elihan in an accident, her precious daughter, whom she raised alone, went to war because of the Archduke. Despite all the difficulties and suffering, the Marquise not only did not blame the Archduke, but also consoled him. The Archduke was deeply grateful to the Elihan family and did not understand how he could thank these people for all the good they had done for him. Venelucia heard the familiar nickname Ben, by which Luna addressed him with joy in her voice. The Archduke looked up and saw his childhood friend, who was smiling brightly at his arrival and waving to Ben from the balcony. Luna smiled so brightly at her childhood friend and was so happy about his arrival that the atmosphere in the room became warm and light. The girl very quickly came down from the second floor and approached her childhood friend. She rushed to hug him with a smile on her face, saying that she was very happy to see him after so many years. Venelucia stood reservedly and with a slight smile on his face noted that they really hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he was very glad that Luna had returned home unharmed. Luna was hurt by Ben's reserved reaction to her return, so she asked him point blank if a man shouldn't be more cheerful. Hadn't he missed her all this time? Venelucia was surprised by Luna's words, so his eyes and eyebrows rose slightly. The Archduke did not answer. He only lowered his head slightly and looked at his childhood friend. Luna held Ben by his cloak and asked what was happening to him. Luna was worried about the silence of her childhood friend, so she reached out her hand to Ben's face, who had been standing silently all this time and had not said a word, because he was lost in his thoughts about the fact that in front of him was definitely Lukalina, whom he had been yearning for. Venelucia didn't let Lukalina touch his face. He grabbed the girl's hand before her fingers touched his cheek. Luna was surprised by her childhood friend's behavior and looked at her hand that he was holding. Venelucia removed his hand from Luna's hand and looked at the girl, thinking that she was his first love. Lukalina Elihan was the girl whom Venelucia considered his future companion and comrade, with whom they went through fire and water. Venelucia always watched with tenderness as his childhood friend slept. Memories of Luna falling asleep while studying flashed before his eyes, and he remembered that his world had once been filled with those words. Immediately after the sleeping Seli appeared before his eyes with a bright smile, and he realized that after meeting Seli, his world had completely changed. Venelucia decided not to repeat his past mistakes and to tell Luna directly. The Archduke called Luna by her childhood nickname and asked her for forgiveness, which made the Marquise very surprised by Venelucia's behavior. Venelucia realized that he no longer loved the daughter of the Elihan family, so he officially congratulated her on her return and admitted that he was ashamed that the girl had suffered because of him. While the Archduke swore that he would do everything to protect her and the Marchioness to make up for everything they had experienced over the years, Luna could not understand why Ben's expression was not the same as before, and why he avoided even the casual touches that he had previously sought out. Luna noted that Ben had already done enough for them, so she did not understand why the man was behaving like this, to which the Archduke confessed to his childhood friend that he had a girlfriend whom he truly loved, so he would not be able to be with her like before. Ben added that he had to tell Luna this in person, so he came to see her today, after which his lordship said goodbye to his childhood friend and left the Elihan family home. Luna, who had absolutely no idea what was happening, tried to stop him, but the man ignored her. Seli stood by the window and worried that there was still no news from the Archduke, who had previously gone to Lukalina. Seli was worried that Venelucia and Lukalina had become lovers again and were filling the gap that had formed during their separation. Seli began to worry more and more that if the plot returned to the original, her future fate would be extremely difficult. A maid knocked on Seli's bedroom door, apologizing to her mistress for disturbing her. The maid did not wait for her mistress's answer and entered the room, after which she was surprised that her mistress had already woken up and was standing at the window. The maid asked if the lady was cold standing by the window, since Selenia had not yet recovered from her illness. Seli noted with a smile on her face that the sun was shining outside, so she was warm and the maid didn't have to worry. The maid wanted to say something, but she was interrupted by a sharp sound, so she asked what it was. Seli turned to the window and saw a black bird sitting next to it. Selly noted that the sound was made by a bird and asked if it really wanted to fly into the window. Taking a closer look at the bird, Selly became frightened as she had seen it before. The bird looked at the girl with arrogance and impudence. At this point, Selly realized what exactly was behind the bird, so the girl told her nanny that she was tired and wanted to rest alone. Maid Selly heard her mistress's voice trembling, so she asked if she was sure she should leave her alone. In the end, the girl said that she would go, but if Selly needed anything, the nanny would come to her right away. The maid left, closing the door of the room behind her and leaving Selly alone. Selly opened the window, let the bird in, and turned towards the back of the room. The emperor sat down on a chair, and Selina fell to the floor and bowed low to greet His Majesty. The emperor looked down at the daughter of the Daphne family and was pleasantly surprised that the girl was able to recognize him. The daughter of the Daphne family apologized to the emperor for keeping him waiting. The emperor stood up from his chair and noted with a laugh in his voice that he definitely liked Selina. Silly sat down on her knees, and the emperor dropped to one knee in front of her and asked why she, being so smart, had not thought of preventing Venelucia from going to Lucalina. The daughter of the Daphne family now understood why the emperor had come and abruptly lowered her head, her words becoming confused from fear. The emperor was pleased with what was happening and with a smile on his face said that the girl herself understood that she had done wrong, so he asked what he should do. The emperor took Selly's cheek in his hand and said that he was thinking of showing her leniency. The emperor ordered Selly to get up first because she was sick, and a sick person only needed to observe decency for a moment. Selly stood up and wondered if this could be considered leniency, but she thanked His Majesty. The girl looked at the floor and thought with pain that his leniency had prolonged her life, so she should be grateful. At the same time, Selenia thought that this was a very strong humiliation. The emperor looked at the girl with interest and then said that now that Lucalinia had returned, he was giving her two options to choose from. According to the first option, Selenia was to immediately receive confirmation of his love for her. Selenia did not understand how the emperor imagined that she could receive confirmation of the Archduke's love now that the main character had returned. The second option was for Selenia to become friends with Lucalina Elihan. Selenia was very surprised by what the emperor said, and he came closer to the girl and ordered her to get closer to Lucalina and watch her. The Archduke will also have to be watched, and Selenia can use any methods. And if Selenia sees that Lucalina and Venelucia have colluded, then the daughter of the Daphne family must immediately kill the daughter of the Elihan family. Selenia Daphne was in complete shock from what the emperor told her. Selenia was shaking all over with fear. The girl in horror asked the emperor again that she really needed to kill Lady Elihan. The emperor asked what was the matter, whether Selenia did not want to obey his order. Selly took courage and confessed to the emperor that although she was a thorn of Chlorochaeon, she was still an ordinary person with no special abilities, and she could not cope with such a talented swordmaster as Lady Elihan. Selenia asked the emperor not to force her to carry out this order. The emperor smiled and said that if this was the only reason, then he would help the girl. Then the emperor extended his hand and threw something to the girl. A small bag fell to the floor next to Selly, containing what was supposed to help the girl kill Lady Elihan. Selly took the bag and took out a ring that at first glance seemed completely ordinary. However, if you turn the stone in the ring, you can see a small blade in the center that has been smeared with poison. Selene Daphne was horrified by the thought of becoming a murderer. So she took courage and told the emperor that if the Marquise's family found out about this, not only Selene, but her entire family would suffer. The emperor said that this is a special poison that is used only in the imperial family, so the girl does not have to worry about being discovered, and it also lasts for a year, and it will look like Lucalina will get sick and die a natural death. After which the emperor approached Selly with the words that if she was exposed, he would help her. The emperor took Selena Daphne's hand in his own, and then he put a ring on her ring finger and made a promise that he would give Selenia Daphne a position in which no one would be able to lay a finger on her. Selenia watched in amazement as the emperor placed the ring on her finger and said all these words. She was trembling with fear under the arrogant and confident gaze of the emperor, who suddenly promised that he would ensure the girl's safety and make her empress if anything went wrong. The girl was terribly scared because his words did not make her happy at all. For Seli, the emperor's promise was a threat because such a life near him would be no different from slavery. At this time, it was an ordinary sunny day at the Archduke's estate. The Archduke opened the door to one of the rooms of his estate and entered it. There was silence in the room where Seli had lived for 6 years, and the Archduke wondered why he hadn't realized this before. The Archduke was reminded of how Venelucia had invited Seli to a pastry shop in the past, where Luna often went, so the girl should have liked it too. But Selenia refused him then, saying that she already had plans, but she would go there with him another day. He remembered how Seli had left then, and thought that his carelessness that day must have hurt Seli's feelings greatly. The Archduke remembered the vivid image of Seli calling to him, and thought that he was ready to do anything just to get her back. Venelucia met Selenia shortly after returning from the battlefield. Before this, his elder brother, for whom the existence of Venelucia was a hindrance, sent Lucalina to war and warned that the life of the Marquis's daughter Elihan depended on the behavior of the Archduke. In the end, in order to appease his own brother, who was also a tyrant, Archduke Venelucia began to pretend to be a womanizer. Having met many young ladies, Venelucia did not experience any real feelings for any of them. It was then that the Archduke met Selenia at one of the imperial banquets. The daughter of the Daphne family appeared out of nowhere and entered his life for a long time. He moved the girl to live with him on his estate, and then 3 years later, the girl approached him with a request for the first time. Venelucia remembered how Seli approached him and addressed him with a slight smile. The Archduke remembered how surprised he was that Seli had decided to ask him for something for the first time in 3 years, so he told her to ask for anything. Seli's first request was to go home while his lordship was away on campaign. Venelucia said that he would order the servants to collect a lot of jewellery and valuables, since the girl was going home for the first time after a long separation, but Seli politely refused to take anything with her. The Archduke wanted to object, but the servants interrupted him and reported that preparations for the campaign were completely completed. Venelucia turned to her and asked if Seli was sure she didn't want to take anything with her. Seli replied that she was sure of it, so his lordship should not worry and he could go. Venelucia approached the door and before leaving said that he would go and they would see each other after his return. The Archduke remembered that from that day on, Seli disappeared for the first time for a whole month. The Archduke was worried that there had been no news from Seli for a long time. If it had been another lady, he would not have paid attention, but strangely, his thoughts always belonged to Selene. It was only 2 months later that the servants told Venelucci the good news that Seli had returned. Seli entered so calmly and greeted his lordship with the words that she was glad to see the Archduke return and that he had returned unharmed. Seeing the unperturbed look and not receiving an explanation for his 2-month absence, Venelucia felt angry. The Archduke turned around and didn't say a word to her, which made Seli worry. In fact, while Seli was absent and had not given any news of herself, the Archduke was very worried about her. Venelucia gave orders to his men to find out what had happened to Seli. As it turned out, all this time Seli was arguing with the Viscount and Viscountess over the issue of marriage, but she did not show him her problems. 3 years ago, Venelucia didn't realize it all, but now he realized that she didn't treat him like a lover she could rely on, and that's why he was upset. The Archduke sat down on Seli's bed and began to blame himself for being a fool who had only just realized it. A servant knocked on the door and informed the Archduke that Lady Citrine wished to see him. Archduke Venelucia entered the room where Lady Citrine was waiting for him. Rosiana Citrine was a girl with long red hair and amber eyes. When Seli went away for 2 months to Daphne's estate, Lady Citrine came to see him one day and they had a little chat. This moment was caught by reporters, which immediately caused a major scandal, and newspaper headlines began to be full of words that Lady Citrine had become the Archduke's new lover. All the newspapers were trumpeting about it, so Venelucia was sure that the information had reached Sally too, but even then she remained close to him. The Archduke walked over and sat down opposite Lady Citrin, and then they greeted each other, noting that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. The girl did not beat around the bush for long, but said directly that she wanted to take a place next to his lordship. The Archduke didn't even bat an eyelid, he simply asked what exactly the lady had in mind. Lady Citrin admitted that she had heard that Lady Elihan had returned from the battlefield, and until Luna and the Archduke announced their relationship, the girl would like to have the honour of being Venelucci's lover for a while. The Archduke said it was strange how the lady could have known that the moon had returned. Venelucia noted that the news of the end of the war had not yet been officially announced and was being kept secret. To avoid possible assassination, only family members and close friends knew about Lady Elihan's return, and Lady Citrit was not among them. Having noted all this, the Archduke asked again how Lady Citrit knew this secret information, and the girl was afraid that she had been exposed. Lady Citrit's reaction confirmed Archduke Venelucci's theory, so he said that the answer was obvious to him. The Archduke looked angrily at Lady Citrith and said that the girl had received information from the Emperor. Lady Citrith was horrified that she had been discovered and did not know what to answer the Archduke. Archduke Venelucia was furious. He stood up and said that there was no point in continuing the dialogue, and also warned Lady Citrith that if information about the moon came out, the girl had better be prepared for the consequences. But if she could keep it a secret, then he would forgive her for today's insolence. Lady Citrith was terrified. Her whole body shook with fear. She stood up and looked at the departing Archduke. The next day, the Archduke's estate once again did not know what quiet days looked like. The servant told the Archduke that the newspaper had not been printed by order of his lordship, but rumours began to circulate in high circles about the resumption of relations between Venelucci and Lady Citrith. Venelucia thought that if rumours began to circulate despite the ban, it meant that the initiator had more power than he did, and this could only be the Emperor. The Archduke understood that the situation from 3 years ago was repeating itself, and Sally should not find out about these rumours. Venelucia was angry with his older brother and did not understand why he decided to do this. Venelucia decided that he needed to meet his elder brother urgently, so he ordered his servant to immediately prepare everything for the trip to the imperial palace. At that moment, his servant came to him and said that his lordship had a guest. The Archduke didn't have time to ask who exactly had come when his childhood friend entered the room. Luna approached Ben and asked him to talk to her for a moment. After that day, they met for the first time, so Venelucia ordered tea to be prepared and served to the guest. Ben sat opposite Luna and asked what happened since the girl came to him. Luna took a few sips of tea and then placed the mug back on the cup. Luna looked at Ben and then admitted that she had noticed that the man had been keeping his distance from her lately and asked if it had anything to do with the Emperor. The Archduke was surprised by Luna's words, so he asked what exactly the girl meant. Luna said that if Ben was afraid to come to her because of the Emperor, then he didn't have to worry about it anymore. Luna admitted that while she was on the battlefield under the orders of His Highness, she was not only engaged in fighting. Her mother, who remained in the capital all the time, was busy distracting His Highness's attention. Marquise Eliane had been helping her daughter all this time, who was busy attracting many people to their side on the battlefield, who would definitely become their strength. Luna confessed to Ben that she now had power and asked her childhood friend if he wanted to overthrow the Emperor with her. Ben was so surprised by Luna's confidence and words that he was speechless. The Archduke thought that despite the fact that he and the Emperor were not on the best of terms at the moment, he had never thought about overthrowing his older brother. The father never paid attention to the death of the Empress, so in that cold palace the two brothers were each other's only support. The father was always busy only with his concubines, and he hated his two heirs to such an extent that he mocked his brothers every day. The father reproached his two sons for taking the worst from their mother and often ordered them to be locked up. They lived through those times together, and the elder brother eventually won the struggle for power, destroying many of the previous emperor's other children. The Archduke, like no one else, understood that his brother had suffered greatly in the struggle and that his character had changed, but he could not betray his brother just because of this. Archduke Venelucia sadly told the moon that she had misunderstood something. Venelucia stated directly, and without a shadow of a doubt, that he was not going to kill his older brother, since despite all the difficulties in their relationship, the emperor was his only brother and comrade, with whom they had gone through fire and water together. Lucalina smiled and then said that in that case she would change her question. Lucalina noted that Venelucia had changed a lot and asked if Lady Selenia Daphne was the reason for this. Ben didn't expect to hear this question from Luna, so he was a little surprised and didn't know what to answer. Luna sipped her tea calmly and concluded that her guess was correct. Luna then returned the cup to its saucer and asked if Ben wanted her to tell him something. Luna told Ben that he does not love Lady Daphne because his feelings are not real. Ben got angry at Luna and said that his feelings for Selly were sincere. Luna admitted to Ben that in the future she knew the Archduke did not act like that, but Venelucia did not understand the words of his childhood friend and asked what she meant. Luna told Ben that she had gone back 5 years, after which Luna admitted that she was the Thorn of Chlorochaeon. Venelucia was very surprised that his childhood friend turned out to be someone who is only the stuff of legends. Luna admitted that she plans to change what she saw before the regression, that is, that future. It is for this reason that she did not end the war immediately, but dragged it out until this moment, as she gathered people ready to stand on their side. Luna told Ben outright that he had to choose her, and they had to unite because that was the only way they could both survive. Otherwise, in the future, Ben will die at the hands of the Emperor, who will plunge a dagger into his heart. In the future, the Emperor will kill his younger brother without a drop of doubt or regret. After listening to his childhood friend, Ben said that although she doesn't treat him the same way as before, he won't kill him because they are of the same blood. Luna knew it was hard for Ben to believe, but she told him about what would happen in 2 years. Exactly 2 years later, Ben will begin a long battle for the throne with the Emperor, in which he will be defeated. After defeat, Ben and Luna will die at the hands of the Emperor. Venelucia said that he had no desire to take the throne, so he would not start a war with his brother, and he was sure that his older brother did not want to kill him either. Luna didn't understand why her childhood friend was acting like this, so she urged him to wake up and face the truth. Luna reminded him that the Emperor was the one who sent Ben to war all this time because he wanted to kill him. Ben thought so too at first, especially that day when they played chess. The Emperor ordered him to go on a campaign and said that this was an imperial order. Venelucia calmly replied that if this is what his elder brother wants, then that is exactly what he will do. Then the Emperor asked his younger brother not to misunderstand this because he did not want him to die. The Emperor made his move in chess and added with a bright smile on his face that his little brother would be grateful to him for this later. At the time, Ben did not understand what his brother had in mind and was sure that it was a cunning plan by the Emperor to quietly kill him. In the end, the elder brother's words turned out to be true. Upon returning from the war, Venelucia, who was laughed at as the Emperor's snotty younger brother, became a war hero and increased his political support. The Archduke was confident that until he was the first to raise a rebellion against the Emperor, the sword between the brothers would not be drawn. Venelucia shook his head, then told his childhood friend that he was grateful to Luna for her words out of concern for him, but there was one thing he could say for sure. The Archduke was confident that his elder brother was not planning to kill him yet. At that moment, Ben remembered his older brother, who stood covered in blood during the conquest of power. Ben was shocked and afraid of his older brother, who at that moment emanated a murderous aura. Seeing his younger brother, his eyes became kinder and his voice became gentler. The Emperor called his younger brother and then walked up to him. The Emperor knelt down before Ben, then hugged his younger brother tightly and said that now there were no more people who would hurt him. In the past, the elder brother risked his life to protect Ben, so despite all his hatred for the Emperor today, the Archduke will not point a sword at his brother. Luna was unhappy with Ben's answer, so she said she didn't want to have this conversation, but he left her no choice. Sally revealed that Ben loved her so much that he chose the girl's side over the Emperor's, and she also reminded her childhood friend that she was on the battlefield for him. Ben said that he was immensely grateful to Luna for this, and that his life would not be enough to pay off his debt to her. Ben then noted that the future Luna knows is very different from the present, because now he loves Selenia. Ben assured that the future would definitely change, and all these words touched the girl so much that she even blushed. Luna's mind was a little fuzzy. She was so angry that her body was shaking, but still the girl asked Ben if he would regret it in the future. Luna admitted that Selly was just clinging to him and wouldn't be able to help him in the future, but she was different. She could be there and protect him. Luna slammed her fist on the table in anger and started screaming that he couldn't help but love her, because the future Luna saw was different. Luna and Ben's conversation was interrupted by a servant, who knocked on the door and said that he had an urgent message for the Archduke. A servant named Alvante reported that he had urgent business for the Archduke concerning Lady Daphne. Seeing Ben stand up abruptly, Luna tried to stop him, saying that they weren't finished talking yet. But Ben was clearly in a hurry, so he said on the run that it was urgent and they would talk another time. The Archduke left his childhood friend alone and went out to the servant to ask what had happened. Venelucia was very worried about Sella's condition and asked if something bad had happened to her. The servant informed the Archduke that Viscount Daphne had just died in a carriage accident, which made Venelucia very worried about the condition of his former lover. Hearing rumours that his daughter had broken up with the Archduke, he dropped everything and rode out in the rain to support Selly, but the carriage overturned due to the slippery road. The Archduke felt great pain, but stood motionless, trying to comprehend what was happening. Venelucia understood that for Viscount Daphne, the news of the separation of his only dearly beloved daughter, who insisted on a relationship with him despite his fierce resistance, must have been a great shock. It was rainy outside, and despite the day, it was dark because of the clouds. Selly ran and covered her father, hoping that he would hear her and respond. Nanny Selly ran up to her with an umbrella and said that the girl would get sick, so she needed to get out of the rain as soon as possible. Selly didn't hear anyone. She just kept walking and calling for her father. The nanny began to say that it was not Selly's fault, but suddenly her mistress fell to her knees, and the maid was afraid that the girl had hurt herself. At that moment, another person under an umbrella was walking towards Selly and the nanny. The woman ordered Selenia to stand up. Hearing a familiar voice, Selly was surprised to see her mother. Selenia's mother looked at her daughter with disdain and seemed to be far away from her. Viscountess Daphne looked down at her daughter and said that she hated her very much. Selly remembered how one day she opened her eyes to find herself reborn, but thanks to her parents' strong love, her past life had faded. The girl remembered how one fine day her father came home with a gift for her, and her mother watched with a bright smile on her face as the father and daughter were having fun at that moment. The father handed Selly the doll she so badly desired and watched with tenderness as his daughter hugged the toy tightly with joy. Selly's parents have always been a reliable support for her, so she had a dream that she was working towards all this time. Selly wanted to get out of the Emperor's llamas in the future and live peacefully with her parents in the Daphne estate. However, when her mother approached Daphne after Viscount Daphne's death and told her that she hated her, Selly knew that her dream was not destined to come true. Selly was very surprised by her mother's words and could not believe that this was really happening. She just looked at her mother from below in surprise. The mother stood all in black and held the zone in her hand. She did not feel a shadow of love or pity for the one who had lost her father and was sitting on the wet ground in front of her. A moment later, the woman began to mourn her dead husband, and Selly felt intense guilt. Fragments of the past appeared before Selly's eyes when she argued with her parents about marriage in Daphne's house and did not listen to her parents' pleas to break up with the Archduke. Selly felt guilty that her father, who was driving to see his daughter, died in an accident. While Selly was feeling guilty, her mother said that because her father had died suddenly, they had a lot of things to do. Mother ordered Selly to get up and stop crying so she could take care of everything that had come their way. It was at this moment that the girl instinctively understood one thing. Selly will never be able to return to those carefree and happy times she had as a child. Sally and her mother returned to the estate after that scene in the courtyard. Mother sat at the empty table and ordered Sally to return to her home. Sally sat at the other end of the table and listened to what her mother was saying to her, but did not respond. The mother looked at her daughter with anger and noted that her father had died, and Sally had finally broken up with that man. Could her stubbornness really be caused by the fact that she still couldn't forget him? Sally decided to answer her mother after all and began to speak, but Madam interrupted her. The woman took the handkerchief and with tears in her eyes asked him not to disappoint her even more. Sally couldn't answer her mother after these words. She only clenched her fists. The conversation between mother and daughter was interrupted by a maid who said that the Archduke had arrived to visit them. The maid reported that the Archduke was standing in the rain and would not move until he saw Lady Sally. Sally's mother was furious at the Archduke's insolence. Viscountess Daphne said that she did not want to see him, but she could not do anything, so she ordered the uninvited guest to be shown into the reception room. Sally came into the reception room and greeted the Archduke, saying that they had not seen his lordship for a long time. His lordship asked Sally how Madame Daphne was, to which the girl replied that her mother was busy preparing for her father's funeral. An awkward silence hung in the room as Sally looked at the cup of tea in front of the girl. Venelucia apologized to Sally, which surprised the girl greatly. The Archduke felt a strong sense of guilt. He told Sally that it all happened because of him. If he had assured Lady Daphne of his feelings earlier, then this would not have happened. Sally was furious when, after these words, Venelucia promised to compensate Sally for her loss. Sally began to shake with anger, and she barely managed to pull herself together to ask how he planned to compensate her. Venelucia gently covered the girl's palm with his own and proposed marriage to her. Having received the offer only because the Archduke felt guilty towards her, Sally could no longer restrain herself. Contrary to Venelucci's expectations, Sally did not accept his offer, but simply silently slapped the Archduke hard in the face. The girl was still shaking with anger and asked how the Archduke dared to say such a thing. She said in a rage that her father's death could not be taken and compensated for, and her dead father clearly would not have wanted that. Venelucia, whose cheek was red from the slap, tried to stop Sally and apologized for his poor choice of words because that was not what he meant. The man placed his hand on the girl's shoulder and admitted that he just wanted to get their relationship back. Then he confessed to Sally that he loved the girl and that it was the pure truth. Sally was surprised by the Archduke's confession and could not believe that his lordship loved her. Sally thought that the main character had returned, which meant that his words were just a curtain to hide his relationship with Lucalina from the Emperor. Exhausted by recent events, Sally directly asked his lordship if he needed her only to protect Lady Luna. Sally admitted that she knew the reason why his lordship kept all his former lovers close, not loving them at all. Sally stated that she knew that the Emperor was keeping a close eye on his lordship and Lady Luna, so they needed and wanted cover. Sally reminded that she had received many gifts from his lordship in the capital, so if he ordered, the girl would obey, so he should not lie that he loved her. The Archduke was hurt by Sally's words, so he asked why she did not believe his words. Sally felt the pressure that if she did not obey His Highness's order, she would die, and her mother would be truly alone. Sally didn't want her mother, who loved her daughter so much, to experience such pain again, and she didn't want the girl's 6 years of effort to go to waste. As much as it hurt, Sally decided to see it through to the end. Now that Lucalina has returned a year early, Sally is determined that things can no longer be allowed to go according to the original. Sally confessed to his lordship that she accepted his proposal, but she would not be deluded or create illusions, so he need not worry. The Archduke told Sally that he had indeed deliberately met with young ladies in order to divert the Emperor's attention from himself, but only with Lady Daphne had he been sincere. After these words, he said that he would be as open with her as possible, and admitted that he was interested to see her reaction when Sally saw him with another. He admitted that Sally seemed to always be there, but seemed to be thinking about something else, so he wanted to make sure that Sally really loved him. Sally laughed, then reminded him that she never broke the promise she made to him on their first night. On their first night, lying in bed, Sally confessed to his lordship that she loved him with all her heart. She remembered the look on his face on their first night and couldn't believe he had decided to test her love in this way. Sally was angry that she had been bending over backwards for him for 6 years, and he had decided to test her in such an arrogant way, so the girl reminded him that he was the one who had broken this communication. Sally was angry that in a situation where he had Lady Luculina, he also needed her love, so she said that she could give him that damn love whenever he wanted, so he could stop playing Sally. The Archduke was surprised, so he slowly reached his hand towards Sally's palm and asked if she didn't love him anymore. Sally pulled her hand back and said that the question was pointless. Lady Daphne was so angry that she turned and headed for the door. At parting, she turned to the Archduke and said that words of love could not exist between them. Venelucia watched as Sally left, and the girl thought only about the fact that this relationship had started out of mutual benefit anyway. Sally left the Archduke, and he left the mansion for his estate, despite the fact that it was still raining outside. The daughter of the Daphne family entered the room where her mother was. The mother stood at the window and watched the departing Archduke and told her daughter that they had talked longer than she had expected. Then the mother turned around and asked again if Sally would definitely return to Daphne's domain. Sally didn't know what to do because the Emperor would definitely not allow her to return to Daphne's domain, and the girl couldn't tell her mother about everything. The Viscountess reminded that if Sally did not become the head of the estate, the title of Viscount would go to someone who was completely unprepared to manage their lands. The mother recalled that she and her father had prepared their daughter from an early age to manage the lands. Viscountess Daphne asked her daughter if Sally was really ready to give up the estate that her father loved so much. Mother told Sally that she had turned a blind eye to her promiscuity until now, but since it had happened, the girl must definitely return to the estate. Sally felt a strong sense of anxiety and shame when her mother said that her daughter should do this at least for the sake of her late father. Sally sat at the table and remembered the words of her mother, who told her daughter that the accident with the carriage was an accident, but because of Sally's choice. And if she still decided to abandon the domain and choose the capital and the Archduke instead of her father's memory and duty to him, then her mother would no longer be able to love Sally. A maid entered the room with a tray and noted that the mistress looked ill and then asked if something was wrong. The maid then placed the porridge in front of Sally and said that my lady should eat, as she had not eaten anything since her return. Sally was very surprised when she saw a bowl of porridge in front of her and realized that something was wrong. Sally asked how she knew about this porridge because it was the first time she was making it. The maid confessed that she brought this porridge to his lordship with the words that the lady loved it very much. Sally exhaled and let the maid go. The girl left, telling her to call her if she needed anything. Sally looked at the porridge and did not dare to take a spoon. She looked at the plate and remembered how she had prepared it for the first time. In the past, when the Archduke was unusually weak, this porridge was the first thing she impulsively prepared for him. Venelucia was touched by Sally's concern, and he thanked the girl for the porridge, saying that he felt much better. Finally, Sally reached out her hands to the porridge and thought that it was very warm. From this warmth, it seemed that both the soul and the body were warmed. Caring for the patient, ideal temperature, not too hot, not too cold. Sally began to cry, because only now did she understand why his lordship's actions turned everything inside her so upside down. Sally realized that all this time, all 6 years, she had loved the Archduke. Sally didn't understand what to do now, because even the tears wouldn't stop. Lady Daphne wiped her tears with her hand and then decided to pull herself together. Thinking that she needed to eat first, Sally picked up a spoon and began to eat. The daughter of the Daphne family understood that from this moment on, she would have a lot to do. The next morning, it was a sunny and warm day in the Viscountcy of Daphne. The mother came into the room and praised Sally for the good work she had done in checking all the land lease books. The daughter of the Daphne family had been sitting behind the documents for a long time, and it seemed to her that there was no end to it. Sally looked out the window and wondered how her father managed all that paperwork and work on his own. While Sally remained in Daphne's domains, there was no news from the Emperor. Sally found it strange that they received too much money as condolences. Suddenly, Sally stood up and told her mother that she would go out for a short while to deal with some urgent matter and would be back soon. The amount that came to Daphne's family was exorbitant for them, which meant that only one person could send it. Sally knocked on the door of the room that temporarily housed the Archduke, who insisted on remaining in Daphne's domain. The Archduke opened the door and greeted the girl with a joyful smile. Venelucia told Sally that he was just planning to go look for her, but the girl interrupted her lover and said that she wanted to ask him about something. Sally confidently and without hesitation informed his lordship that she was grateful to him for his kindness towards their family, but she could not accept such a large sum. The man followed the girl's example and got straight to the point, telling her that he had thought a lot about Sally's words from yesterday. Archduke Venelucia added that he no longer intended to hesitate. His lordship noted that Sally's reaction and her anxiety then only meant that the girl had loved him more sincerely all this time. The man was silent for a moment and then said that there was no need to forgive him. The Archduke said that he didn't care even if Sally didn't love him now. Venelucia admitted that he intends to do everything possible to make Sally fall in love with him again. Sally was shocked to the depths of her soul, for his lordship had spoken the words that the girl had wanted to hear most of all after she had realized her feelings for the Archduke. The Archduke approached Sally and tenderly embraced the girl, saying that he would prepare a magnificent wedding so that everyone would know that she belonged to him. Sally's heart beat fast, especially at his lordship's words that he would send a formal proposal of marriage to the Viscount's house. Sally called the Archduke, but he did not let her say a word, but only asked the girl to open her heart to him again. Sally felt scared and disgusted with herself because she was ready to give in to his words, not knowing whether they were sincere or just a passing whim. At this, the daughter of the Daphne family hugged his lordship in return, which greatly surprised Venelucia. Sally was so pleased at this moment with his words and actions that the girl told his lordship to do as he wished. Sally didn't understand whether this meant that she was also using his lordship or not, but her heart was squeezed hard. Sally and Venelucia stood in an embrace, and then their lips touched in a kiss, and the girl thought that this moment filled her with happiness. The mother looked sternly at her daughter and said that she wanted Sally to marry a man who would make her daughter happy. Sally tried to convince her mother, but the Viscountess replied that she would never approve of a man connected with the death of Viscount Daphne. A few days ago, the Archduke sent a proposal of marriage, but everything did not go as smoothly as desired. When Sally had previously parted ways with the Archduke as part of the plan, the Emperor had not particularly reacted. However, Sally was worried that if news spread that the marriage with the Archduke had fallen through due to her mother's resistance, the Emperor might harm her. Viscountess Daphne was so angry that she slammed her palm on the table and started screaming about how this man had neglected her daughter for 6 years. And now he had suddenly decided to take action. Sally asked her mother to listen to her, but Viscountess Daphne categorically refused her and stood up. Viscountess Daphne walked up to her daughter, who was sitting opposite her, and handed her an envelope. The mother told her daughter that in the letter the young heir of the House of Pendragon wished to marry her. Before leaving, the mother looked sternly at her daughter and said that if Sally did not marry the young Lord Pendragon, then the girl would not go to the capital. The mother replied that if Sally did not want to marry him, then she would remain on the estate. However, the next day, it was not the young Lord Pendragon who arrived at Daphne's house, but the Archduke of Venelucia. The mother and daughter came out to greet the guest, who was clearly dissatisfied with something. His lordship was angry, so he confidently and boldly declared that he had given Viscountess Daphne no choice. He intended to take Sally. The Archduke's self-confident words hurt the mother. She understood that it would be difficult to go against the Emperor's younger brother. Sally was surprised because this scene seemed familiar to her from the original plot when his lordship decided to marry Lukalina. Then the Emperor with a bloody sword told his younger brother that if he married Lukalina, he would kill him. In that scene, the Archduke took out his sword, saying that he was not giving his older brother a choice now. And then his lordship raised his sword for the first time against his elder brother and put it right to the Emperor's throat. His lordship firmly warned his elder brother that, despite the fact that he was his only relative and the emperor, he would not allow his decisions to be interfered with. The Archduke was ready to cut him down without hesitation in order to take Luculina as his wife. The daughter of the Daphne family could not believe that in this reality, his lordship confidently declared that he would take Sally as his wife. Sally didn't understand whether she was able to change the plot or not, because now it seemed like the story was distorted. She thought with hope that his lordship had chosen not Luculina as his wife, but her, a secondary character. But suddenly the mother said that Daphne's house had one right to immunity, which frightened her daughter quite a bit. Mother said that received from the imperial family at the dawn of the founding of Helios, it grants freedom from any crime except the murder of the imperial family. His lordship became angry and said that to use the right of immunity to reject the offer would be to confront the Archduke in the open. The mother nodded her head positively and swallowed, and finally she made up her mind and answered his lordship. Viscountess Daphne addressed his lordship with the words that during the long years of his relationship with their daughter, the Archduke never once mentioned the engagement, and the love story between him and Lady Elihan was so well known that it thundered throughout the country. She asked his lordship if he had really thought all this time that Daphne's family had not known the reasons why the Archduke would not marry Sally. While Sally was regretting that her parents knew everything, her mother continued to talk and asked his lordship how long his lordship's love, which he assured her daughter of, would last. Sally froze at her mother's words when she emphasized that even the love for Lady Elihan had died down, so what would happen to the feelings for Sally? All this time, Sally thought that her parents were not interested in social life and did not know anything. But it turned out that all this time they were hiding and pretending so as not to hurt her. Sally remembered her mother's face on the day her father died, when she stood there in tears, and that the accident was because of her marriage. His lordship stated that there was a reason for this which he could not yet reveal, but that he loved Sally was the purest truth. Viscountess Daphne could barely contain herself in front of the man she hated, so she noted with a smirk that reasons that cannot be spoken about cannot be more important than her daughter. The conversation was interrupted by a maid who entered the room and announced that guests had arrived. Viscountess Daphne apologized to his lordship and said that she would be away for a short while. Before leaving, the mother told her daughter to hurry up and finish the conversation and then go out so that she could introduce the new head of the house to the people. Viscountess Daphne, accompanied by her maid, left the room, leaving his lordship and Sally alone. His lordship noticed that Sally was behaving strangely, so he called the girl by name questioningly. The love relationship between Sally and Venelucia started out wrong from the very beginning, so the girl then refused the love of the Archduke and remained silent. Suddenly, Sally thought that if his lordship had loved her for a long time and had made that scandal to test her feelings. The girl was very scared because she remembered that her father died because of her, so she doubted whether she would be able to love his lordship again. Sally told his lordship that she hated him. The Archduke immediately began to ask for forgiveness and say that he was wrong, but Sally interrupted him and said that she needed time to think. His lordship tried to stop Sally, but the girl stood up and loudly slapped her palms on the table, silencing the man. Sally rose and walked away, leaving his lordship sitting and looking at her back. Sally left with the thought that the plot of the story had already been changed in any case, so she should not hope for his lordship's love, since this would be at least some kind of payment for the fact that the girl had been deceiving him all this time. His lordship did not want to let Sally go. He stood up and asked her to wait, but the girl did not listen to him. The Archduke ran after Sally, saying that he had something to say, but when he opened the door, he stopped abruptly. The man couldn't believe what he saw when he walked out of the room into the hallway. The young heir of Pendragon approached Sally and formally greeted the girl. Young Lord Pendragon blushed slightly and looked with special tenderness in his eyes at Selenia Daphne. The maids who observed the conversation between young Lord Pendragon and Lady Daphne noted that they looked good together. And rumours also spread among the servants that the young heir of Pendragon had also proposed marriage to Sally. His lordship shook with anger as he heard rumours of the proposal and watched as Selly and that annoying fellow smiled and walked away together. The Archduke did not interfere, but only looked with hatred and anger at the backs of Selly and the young heir of Pendragon. Selly walked the young heir of Pendragon to the door of the room and told him that he could stay there. The young heir of Pendragon thanked Lady Selenia and admitted that he had something he wanted to tell her. The man confessed to Lady Daphne that he was soon leaving for the Kingdom of Spain. By order of the Emperor, which the young heir to Pendragon cannot refuse, he will be in the Imperial Embassy for about 5 years. Selly asked for what reason young Lord Pendragon was telling her all this. Young Lord Pendragon asked Lady Daphne if she would agree to go with him to the Kingdom of Spain as his bride. Selly was very surprised by the offer of the young Lord Pendragon, especially his words that the girl could start a new life there. Young Lord Pendragon dropped to one knee, saying that although this was not the most romantic place, young Lord Pendragon took Lady Daphne's hand tenderly, and then he said tenderly that he had long admired Lady Daphne, and Selly was so surprised that she could not say a word. The man with grey hair and grey eyes confessed that until Lady Daphne's heart stopped beating for the Archduke, he would wait for her endlessly. Selly looked down at the man and didn't know how to react. Young Lord Pendragon admitted that in fact he became her partner at the ball not by order of the Emperor, but because it was his request. Young Lord Pendragon, who was still kneeling, suddenly turned red. The man sincerely asked Lady Daphne for permission to become a part of her daily life. Young Lord Pendragon asked Lady Daphne to become his bride and promised that he would not force her into marriage, and if she did not like him or she fell in love with another, then he would let her go at any time. Then the man smiled and said that he did not expect an answer from Lady Daphne right now. He was ready to humbly wait for her decision. After which the young Lord Pendragon stood up and headed into the room, saying that they would talk about this after the funeral of Viscount Daphne. But for now the girl should have a good rest. Selly stood motionless, astonished by the words and offer of the young Lord Pendragon. She felt as if she were in a terrible dream in which she was going crazy. Selly always wanted someone to get the girl out of that horrible place. The daughter of the Daphne family thought that perhaps if she went away to a distant kingdom for 5 years, all this could finally end. Selly imagined her free and happy life with the young Lord Pendragon in a distant kingdom, and thought that perhaps there she could live the ordinary life she dreamed of. A tear from Selly fell onto the dry floor from above. Selly stood and cried because she realized that this dream was not destined to come true. As long as the daughter of the Daphne family is in the hands of the Emperor, she cannot hide or escape. Selly knew that young Lord Pendragon was not like the Archduke, and she could not drag an innocent man into the quagmire the girl was in. On the day of Viscount Daphne's funeral, she greeted the guests and thanked everyone present for coming. The guests began to approach Lady Daphne one by one and began to express their sincere condolences to her. As people approached, Selly looked towards where some of the guests were standing. In the crowd of people, Selly first noticed and looked at the young Lord Pendragon, who stood calmly and seemed to be waiting for something. After which Selly's gaze moved to his lordship, who was standing waiting for the girl to be free so that he could come and talk to her. Selly knew that right now it was important for her to focus on giving her father a proper funeral, so she pushed thoughts of both men aside and noticed her father's close friend. Selly approached the man and thanked him for coming to the funeral despite the bad weather outside. Selly was horrified when she heard the announcement that the Emperor had arrived for the funeral. All the guests were stunned by this news and suddenly fell silent. The Emperor personally came to the funeral, which left all the guests confused. The girls who were standing next to Selly began to whisper that the Emperor had come to express his condolences to Viscount Daphne. Selly was angry because her father's funeral was supposed to be peaceful and quiet. The Emperor rode on horseback, accompanied by his knights, who attracted too much attention. The Archduke came out to meet the Emperor and stopped the uninvited delegation with one wave of his hand. His lordship ordered the guards to retreat, since he would then accompany the Emperor personally. The elder brother did not like the younger brother's behavior, so the Emperor asked the Archduke what he was allowing himself to do. His lordship noted that with knights the funeral would only become hectic, and besides, his lordship was more suited to the role of an escort, so he would take care of it personally. The emperor looked at the Archduke defiantly and said that Archduke Afron was behaving too insolently. Archduke Afron accepted the emperor's gaze with dignity and said that he would later accept punishment for his insolence, but now he did not intend to retreat. His Highness was displeased and began to dismount from his horse, saying that he understood Archduke Afron's intentions. The emperor passed by Archduke Afron and noted that later His Highness would have to prepare for punishment. His lordship lowered his head a little and meekly agreed with his elder brother. Selly's face was blank. She stood silently and did not dare to move, while the girls nearby gossiped and tried to understand why the emperor had come. Selenia bowed to the emperor as His Highness passed by the girl. When Selly looked up at the emperor, she saw his arrogant gaze, which contained a warning for the girl. Selly began to shake with fear. She began to feel sick again, so she decided that the emperor's purpose at this funeral was to warn the girl about the possible consequences. The daughter of the Daphne family reminded herself that she could not blame His Serene Highness, the Archduke, for her father's death, so as not to destroy what had been done so far. Selly was so scared, it seemed that the girl was about to have another panic attack, but suddenly someone called her and extended a hand to the girl. Selly knew she needed to pull herself together, so she tried to pull herself together and turned towards the man who had called her. The daughter of the Daphne family looked up and saw the young Lord Pendragon standing before her. Selly looked at her guest and decided that it was impossible to continue, and it was time to tell him that the girl could not marry him. Selly knew she couldn't hurt such a good man any further, and besides, he was so much like him. Only now did Selly realize that young Lord Pendragon was very similar to her first love. After thinking for a bit, Selly thought that this was all very strange. The daughter of the Daphne family realized that the young Lord Pendragon and her first love were similar to each other not only in appearance. Selly thought with horror that the manner of speech, the character, the behavior, all this was too similar between the two men. At first, Selly thought that the emperor had simply granted Lord Pendragon's request to provoke the Archduke. However, Selly was mistaken, since the emperor had intended to test the heiress of the House of Daphne in this way from the very beginning. Selly turned to Lord Pendragon and said that she would not be able to enter into any relationship with him. The man was very confused and then asked the girl to think a little more. Selly firmly refused the young Lord Pendragon and admitted that she had already thought enough. The family's daughter, Daphne, turned around and walked away from the young guest, saying that she needed to receive other people who wished to express their condolences. As soon as Selly left the room where she had previously spoken with the young Lord Pendragon, someone called the girl by name. The daughter of the Daphne family immediately recognized the voice and turned her eyes slightly towards the man who called her. The girl turned her whole body towards the Archduke calling her, and His Highness came up and apologized to the girl for the fact that the emperor had probably arrived because of him. The Archduke sadly apologized for the fact that the peace at Father Selly's funeral was disturbed due to his fault, and also noted that His Highness always creates situations for which one later has to ask forgiveness. Selly wanted to answer his lordship, but then she remembered the recent situation. She was surprised and did not expect at all that His Grace the Archduke would go against the emperor and stop his knights. According to the original plot of the novel, the Archduke also waited patiently until he became the lover of Luca-Lina Elihan. Venelucia had never interfered or contradicted His Majesty, but now, for the sake of Selly, he had brought upon himself the punishment of the emperor. Selly had already decided that this gesture was a manifestation of his love for her, but then she remembered the situation with Lord Pendragon and realized that she could not trust anyone's sincerity. Selly was sure that even if the girl took the place of the main character and she and his lordship got married, she would still not be able to love him. Selly's thoughts were interrupted by the birds singing, which the emperor's birds were making as a sign to the girl. The heiress of the house, Daphne, was frightened, as she was not yet ready to meet the emperor, but the singing of the birds told her that His Highness was waiting for Selly in her room. Selly was about to leave the Archduke and head towards the Emperor, but Venelucia carefully took the girl's hand, then put his index finger to his lips and whispered to her to stop. His Grace the Archduke told Selly that it was not just birds singing, so something was wrong here. Venelucia grabbed his sword, and Selly thought that his lordship, being a master of the sword, immediately realized that something was wrong and was afraid that he would get into danger if he entered the room. In order to stop the Archduke and not expose him to danger, the girl suddenly hugged his lordship from behind and called him loudly. Selly pressed herself against the Archduke from behind and asked the man to stay next to her. Selly and Venelucia entered the bedroom and sat down on the bed. Only after that did his lordship ask the girl if she felt better, to which the girl answered positively. His lordship noted that fortunately they no longer felt anything, but the girl did not listen to him. She lowered her head and was immersed in her own thoughts. Selly's face was blank, and she thought with anxiety that she had almost given away her close relationship with His Highness. Suddenly, the Archduke turned to Selly and said that he would be by her side until the girl fell asleep. And this news brought the heiress of the House of Daphne back to reality and looked at the man. Selly thanked his lordship for his kindness and attention to her, but asked if he would not feel cramped in such a small room. Venelucia noted that none of this mattered, since the girl had just looked very worried. The heiress of the House of Daphne thought to herself that in any case, she only calmed down when he was around, so she told Venelucia that she didn't mind and asked him to stay. His lordship received the answer he desired, and then began to rise from the bed on which he had been sitting with the daughter of the house, Daphne. His Serene Highness the Archduke knelt down before Selly and confessed that he would do anything for her. Venelucia gently covered Selly's hands with his palms and added that his lordship was sure that he was the one the girl needed. He reached out his hand and placed it on the girl's cheek with a sincere confession that he had seen Selly reject the young Lord Pendragon, and if she had not done so, perhaps he would have killed the boy. These words made Selly feel uneasy. She felt some kind of terrible feeling inside. His Serene Highness the Archduke began to rise, saying that he had not wanted to tell this to Selly, but had nevertheless decided to do so. The blue-eyed man, with a smile on his face, admitted to Selly that he was not going to give her to anyone, let alone Lord Pendragon. After these words, the smug man again extended his hand to the girl's face, who was shocked by his words. Venelucia looked at Selly with tenderness in his eyes and said that he would send to hell any man who wanted to be with her. The Archduke embraced Selly and confessed that while they were together the girl had received a huge number of love letters, but he could not allow even one to reach her. The Archduke burned all the letters because he could not believe that all those impudent fellows dared to covet his beloved. He pushed the girl onto the bed and said that he did not plan to act like that in the future. Selly was lying on the bed, and Venelucia breathed on her and admitted that he didn't care anymore, even if she didn't love him. The man smiled and added that she just needed to tolerate him. In her intense fear of the Emperor, Selly completely forgot that Venelucia was also the main character of this dark novel. The next morning, the Daphne family estate was quiet and sunny. The owners of the house spent the second day of the funeral of Viscount Daphne. Selly couldn't focus on the guests because she was worried about the main characters, so she turned around and looked at the two brothers. At this time, the Emperor and his brother, the Archduke, stood to the side and discussed something. These brothers were known in the novel, that Emperor Clifford used all sorts of tricks to get Luculina. In contrast, his brother Venelucia used kindness and gentleness to win Luculina's heart. Selly knew she had no way to escape this world, so she decided to go talk to young Lord Pendragon. Selly and young Lord Pendragon walked outside, away from prying eyes. The man whom Selly had rejected the day before seemed confused and asked the girl what she wanted to talk about. Selly stated without a shadow of a doubt and with complete confidence that she knew that the young lord had approached her on the orders of His Highness. Caught in the act, the man turned his head away from the girl and said that he did not understand what the daughter of the Daphne family was talking about. Selly did not succumb to the provocations of the young Lord Pendragon, but only added that his mission had failed, since she had found out about everything. The man did not evade, and plucked up his courage and asked what the daughter of the Daphne family wanted from him. Selly's request was simple. She just wanted young Lord Pendragon to go to His Grace the Archduke and tell him that Selly had refused him. And he gave the reason for the refusal as the fact that the girl loved another man. Selly stressed that only in this case would the young Lord Pendragon not be punished by the Emperor for failing the mission. Young Lord Pendragon seemed to want to say something, but at the last moment he changed his mind, only clenched his teeth and said that he would do just that. Selly let out a sigh of relief, because now she would be able to divert the Emperor's suspicions from herself for a little while. Selly stood in front of her father's grave holding a white flower as the priest gave the farewell speech. The two girls who stood behind Selly were not discussing the deceased, but the fact that the Archduke was still at the funeral despite the fact that they had already parted with Selly. The girls gossiped that they were expecting some kind of spectacle since the Emperor himself had arrived, but he was not there. While the girls were discussing how the daughter of some viscount was not suitable for His Serene Highness the Archduke, Venelucia approached Selly and gently took her hand. His Serene Highness the Archduke, who was very worried about his beloved, asked Selly to talk to him. Selly didn't understand what was happening because the girl felt so bad about herself that she started to feel sick. Viscount Daphne's daughter pushed away her former lover's hand with words of forgiveness. Selly did not understand what was happening to her or why she was doing this, but she only said that she had nothing to talk about with his lordship and turned away from him. Selly understood that after yesterday's outburst, the images of the Archduke and the Emperor began to overlap in her perception. Not having received an answer from Selly, Venelucia turned to Viscountess Daphne and asked her to take the girl away for a short while. Rumours began to circulate in the hall again, and everyone began to reread the topic of what Viscountess Daphne would answer, considering that she did not like the Archduke. Selly felt awkward. She understood that there was a difference in status and did not want to put her mother in an awkward position. Selly didn't let her mother get a word in and was the first to tell Venelucia that Lady Lukalina Elihan had already returned. The Archduke was confused and whispered to Selly why the girl was suddenly asking about Lukalin. Selly bowed to the Archduke and noted that since the one his lordship truly loved had returned, she asked him not to act so selfishly towards her. The Archduke was almost beside himself. He didn't know how to convey to the girl that Luna was no longer of interest to him. His Serene Highness the Archduke said with displeasure that, judging by the girl's reaction, a conversation between them was indeed necessary. Venelucia suddenly grabbed the girl by the hand and pulled her along with him, saying that it would only take a minute. The guests were so amazed by this picture that the ladies even covered their mouths with their hands, and the men were confused and did not know what to do. But the Archduke didn't care. He confidently led his beloved around the room, not paying attention to the looks of others, and only the Emperor watched this whole picture with a smile on his face and with special pleasure. Having brought Selly into the garden, where there was no one, Venelucia let go of Selly's hand and stood opposite her, apologizing for having pulled the girl by force. He explained his actions by saying that the nobles were unknowingly humiliating her, and he could not just stand and listen. Selly clenched her fists. She was so angry and ready to scold his lordship. Venelucia interrupted the girl with the words that he had already told her earlier. He gently took the girl by the hands and approached her, reminding Selly that now he would do everything possible to get her. He carefully extended his hand to the girl's face and suggested that they return to the capital together immediately after the funeral. His Grace the Archduke crossed his palm and Selly's, and then gently said that if she did not want to, she did not have to marry him right away. Venelucia looked at Selly with love and tenderness, and in the same voice asked Selly to be near him. Selly was so shocked by the Archduke's words that she could not say a word, and most importantly, she did not understand what she should feel now. Looking into his eyes, Selly thought she had gone crazy because his gaze gave her a special thrill. Her head was screaming that she shouldn't get close to this man, who her father and mother were against. Then why does everything inside Selly tremble and speak of love for his lordship? Sally tried to pull herself together and ordered herself to collect her thoughts and feelings. Sally reminded herself that her life and her mother's were under the control of the Emperor. So even though she decided not to love the Archduke, she was obliged to marry him. Sally thought with pain that she herself had fallen into a trap that she had set herself. After thinking for a moment, Sally accepted the Archduke's offer to return with him to the capital. The girl smiled tenderly and said that they would return together immediately after the funeral. The Archduke was so happy that his bright smile and the slight blush on his cheeks reminded one of a joyful child. The man was filled with positive emotions, and he grabbed Sally by the waist and began to spin her in the air. The Archduke was overwhelmed with happiness, so he joyfully told Sally that they would finally be back together. Sally extended her palms to the Archduke's face and tenderly kissed his lordship, thinking that her many years of work had not been in vain. The Archduke stood in the garden and kissed his beloved, holding her in his arms. However, everything was not as easy as they imagined. As if to mock the patience of her mother, who with difficulty allowed Sally to go to the capital with the Archduke, the girl got to the capital alone. Just an hour ago, Sally and Venelucia were riding together in a carriage, the man resting his head on the girl's shoulder. The Archduke looked up and asked his beloved if there was anything she would like to do in the capital. Sally was about to answer when someone's voice interrupted her and told her bad news. A female voice reported that there had been an assassination attempt on Lady Elihan. The carriage doors opened, and Sally and Venelucia saw a maid who introduced herself as Luna's servant and said that only his lordship could help her mistress. It was clear from his lordship's face that he was very frightened for his childhood friend. He listened with particular concern as the maid begged him to help. Otherwise, something terrible would happen. His Serene Highness the Archduke could not refuse to help, so he apologized to his beloved. Venelucia took one horse and rode to where the main character was. Sally knew it was inevitable, but she also felt a strong sense of anxiety. Sally had already arrived at the Archduke's house and was climbing the steps to her room, but she still couldn't understand why Lukalina had been attacked. According to the knight, it was assumed that Lady Elihan was attacked by aliens, whom Lukalina had driven out by force. But this attack seemed too sudden to Sally. It seemed to Sally that this attack was orchestrated by someone with power like the Emperor. Sally walked into her room and closed the door, as if expecting to see someone. In front of the daughter of the House of Daphne sat the Emperor, who emphasized that his younger brother had nevertheless gone to save Lady Elihan. The girl immediately dropped into a low bend and greeted His Highness the Emperor. The Emperor looked tenderly at the girl and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The Emperor then asked Sally if it was really so difficult to win the heart of his younger brother. Sally gritted her teeth and said that it was not difficult at all. She would win his heart very soon. She just needed a little more time. The Emperor rose from his chair and walked towards Senelia, who was kneeling in front of him. The Emperor stated that the girl had had plenty of time, so now he changed his mind. The Emperor put on a fake smile and asked the girl if she knew that all the thorns of the Chlorochaean from past generations had extraordinary abilities. Sally looked at the tyrant in front of her with surprise and fear and was afraid to even think about his thoughts. The Emperor, however, was too busy with his own thoughts, so he continued to talk about how the offspring of these Chlorochaean thorns took over the abilities of their parent. The Emperor then asked if Senelia was hiding her abilities from him. His Highness looked at Sally and said that he could use someone who could give birth to an extraordinary child. Sally wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hide from this monster that was standing right in front of her. But the Emperor paid no attention to this. He only told Sally that he would give the girl a new choice. The Emperor grabbed Senelia by the face and pulled her face forcefully closer to his. He then ordered Senelia to become his Empress, which left the girl in complete fear. While Sally couldn't understand what was happening, the Emperor removed his hand from the girl's face and cursed. Then he gently placed his palm on the girl's face and said that the more he looked at her, the more he realized that she was his type. Of course, because Sally was not just submissive, but also someone who could be manipulated as one wished. The Emperor was so attracted to the abilities of the child that could be born from Sally that the girl began to worry greatly about her future. Before Sally could realize that the Emperor in the original story was obsessed with the main character, and now that the plot had changed, he could become obsessed with her, Sally was called by name. The Emperor turned towards the sound and noted that his younger brother had already returned home. The Emperor was sorry that their dialogue was interrupted, but he got up and jumped out the window, leaving Sally alone in the room. Sally was in complete space. Her vision was blurry and her mind was clouded. She felt so bad that she began to lose her balance and fell to the floor. In a moment of danger, Venelucia saved Sally, but he ran at the first call to another girl. Now he has returned again and saved her. But how can she continue to live in all this chaos and fear? What should she do? Sally closed her eyes and lay on the cold floor, completely unwilling to get up or do anything. Sally was able to get up about the time when Venelucia could wait no longer and began to knock furiously on her door. His Serene Highness the Archduke, with concern on his face and in his voice, began to ask about the well-being of his beloved, because he had heard about her recent fainting. When Sally woke up, she realized her dire situation as never before. Sally thought sadly that she was unable to escape from the clutches of the Emperor and the Archduke. If choosing between two brothers, the girl would choose the Archduke, next to whom she can at least breathe calmly. With the Archduke by her side, her life and the lives of her family would be completely safe. However, for his lordship, Archduke Lukalin remains an unchanging constant. Oh, that damn original. When the Archduke chose Sally instead of the original's heroine, the girl already thought she had escaped her sad fate. But Sally was again overcome with despair that everything seemed to be going according to the original plot of the novel. Sally had made a clear decision that if, because of the shackles of the original, she could not become the Archduke's beloved, then she would at least become his desire. Usually in novels, love wins over lust, but in this story everything will be different, Sally decided for herself. Sally hoped that if she showed such determination, the Emperor might retract his offer to make me Empress. To begin with, Sally decided to hold on to the Archduke's heart, which could still swing towards the main character. Sally looked at the Archduke completely emotionlessly and informed him that she would have to completely reconsider his offer to be with him. The girl told him that he could be angry as much as he wanted, but she was too worried about Lady Lukalina. His Grace the Archduke did not understand why Sally did not believe him and asked the girl about it directly. He reminded Sally, with a particularly hurt look on his face, that they had agreed to be together. Sally agreed that they had reached an agreement, but added that today's situation could happen again. Sally added that his lordship would run back to Lukalina again and again, every time she was in danger, because he had not let go of his feelings for her. Sally admitted frankly to the Archduke that she could not bear it. There was silence in the room. Sally understood that this manipulation of hers would work perfectly, since Venelucia was used to getting what he wanted since childhood. Venelucia didn't know what to answer, so he said that they would talk about it later, when the girl was no longer nervous. Sally's eyes radiated confidence as she said that she didn't want to interfere in his and Luna's relationship, because she knew how important they were to each other since childhood. Sally told his lordship that her heart too might turn away from the Archduke. The Archduke did not answer and simply left silently, unable to find the words. The daughter of the Daphne family closed the door of her room after the Archduke left, and her heart was very heavy. She made herself some cold coffee and began to think about how, looking at the enraged Archduke, the possibility of becoming his desire, and the fact that she could hook him, the girl trembled. Sally took her coffee and sat down on the chair next to the coffee table, thinking that she was now the perfect villain. The capital was buzzing with excitement about the welcoming banquet for Lukalina's return, and Sally had received an invitation to attend as well. Sally picked up the invitation and ran her eyes over it again, hoping to understand why Lady Elihan had invited her, someone she didn't even know personally, to the banquet. The daughter of the Daphne family thought that the memories of the original novella were starting to darken, as she did not remember anything about this banquet. Because the Emperor's men were constantly watching her, she couldn't even write down the plot. Sally stood up to start preparing for the banquet and tried to remember what had happened at the banquet. Sally clutched the letter tightly, remembering that this was a turning point in the original plot. The girl grabbed her head in panic and thought about how at this welcoming banquet Lucalina had confessed her love to the Archduke. A picture of Lucalina and the Archduke standing next to each other and holding hands appeared before the girl's eyes. Thus, Lucalina acted quite boldly to declare war on the Emperor. In the original story, Lucalina looked defiantly at the Emperor and then turned to his younger brother. Ben, who was looking at her with a look full of love, listened with pleasure to her every word. Lucalina looked at Ben with a tender gaze and with a slight smile asked Ben to marry her. Lady Elihan proposed to the Archduke right in front of everyone at her welcoming banquet. In the original story, Ben was so touched and grateful that he, of course, accepted her offer. Sally came back to reality and looked at the clenched letter in her hands. She knew that even though she had deliberately asked the Archduke to give her time, if his lordship accepted the offer now, she would have no other choice. Unlike the original plot, Ben was now very hesitant about Sally, so the girl still had hope that he would not accept the offer so easily. But seeing how easily his lordship broke down at Lucalina's request, Sally could not be completely sure of this. From all the worries, Sally's head began to hurt, and she thought sadly that she wanted to avoid meeting Lucalina. Sally thought that Lucalina was very different from her, since she held her destiny in her own hands. Sally, who unlike her had no control over anything, thought about how pathetic she would look in front of the main character. Sally told herself to pull herself together, which caused her gaze to stop wavering and become straight and clear. And then she reminded herself that now was not the time to indulge in thoughts. She clenched her fists and clearly decided that she needed to take action to prevent the main character from confessing. On the day of the banquet, as always, the weather outside was beautiful and sunny. The Archduke greeted Sally with joyful words, noting that he was happy that the girl had come to the banquet. The man admitted that he felt uneasy after they broke up, so now he is sincerely glad that the girl will go with him to the banquet as his partner. Sally smiled but looked a little upset. Sally remembered that immediately after receiving the invitation from Lucalina, the Archduke sent her another one asking her to become his partner at this ball. Sally accepted his lordship's invitation, since to go as his partner meant acting according to plan and preventing Lucalina's confession. His Serene Highness the Archduke took Sally by the hand and said that he had something to show her. When Sally asked what exactly he wanted to show her, Veneluccia opened the door to the room and said that he was talking about a dress for the banquet. Veneluccia opened the door and added that he hoped that Sally would like the dress he had chosen. When she saw the dress, Sally was shocked to the depths of her soul and lost the power of speech. His lordship offered Sally a dress that only an Archduchess of the House of Archdukes could wear. Sally knew that wearing this dress meant being recognized as the Duchess of the house. Sally turned to the Archduke and said in a panic that the dress was too luxurious for her, and therefore she could not accept it. The Archduke objected to Sally, noting that the girl was quite worthy of wearing the most luxurious things. Sally did not argue, but said directly that she did not want to become a reason for gossip and ridicule at today's banquet. The Archduke sadly said only that he understood the girl and that she did not have to wear a dress if she did not want to. His lordship suggested that Sally order a dress from the imperial tailor. He was sure that the dress from Madame Langpadour would be ideal for the girl. Sally was astonished by the Archduke's proposal and asked directly how she, the daughter of an ordinary viscount, could wear clothes from the designer of the imperial court. Sally said that if his lordship insisted she would go in her dress, then the Archduke offered her a compromise. He suggested that Sally listen to her and she would wear a dress from a designer chosen by the Archduke. The imperial court dress would cause unnecessary gossip until their relationship became official, but Sally decided to give in to his lordship at least on this point before he became too upset. Sally agreed to his proposal, which made His Serene Highness the Archduke as happy as a child. He hugged the girl sharply and tightly and admitted that he was incredibly happy. Sally did not share the Archduke's joy and stood with a sad expression on her face because she was sure that she would regret this choice. His Serene Highness the Archduke brought Sally to Madame Tongaroot's studio in the capital. When Sally and Venelucia entered the studio, they were met by Lukalina, who happily greeted her childhood friend nicknamed Ben. Lukalina, who was being measured for her future dress, asked Ben why he had come to such an unexpected place. Lukalina dismissed the tailors with the words that they should rest a little and then turned to her childhood friend. Only now did Luna notice the girl with Ben's hand on her shoulder and asked if it was Lady Daphne. Sally could not answer, as she was struck by the beauty of Lady Elihan. In real life, Lukalina looked exactly like in the original, just as confident, elegant, mannered and eternally cheerful, that is, ideal in everything. But Sally was confused by the fact that this time Lukalina ordered the dress from the Tongaroot studio and not from Madame Carlo's studio, which was run by her relatives. Sally always avoided Madame Carlo's studio because she was afraid that Lukalina and Venelucia would run into each other. And despite all her fears and caution, the two still collided in Madame Tongaroot's studio. Sally was overcome with panic as she thought that the two were destined for each other, but the Archduke protected her with his back, sensing something was wrong. The Archduke interrupted his childhood friend and asked her to wait a little, as he would like to introduce Sally formally later. Luna was hurt and unhappy with her childhood friend's behaviour and asked if Ben thought she might harm Lady Daphne. The Archduke felt awkward and began to make excuses, but Sally stopped him. She gently touched Venelucci's shoulder, as if pushing him aside, and then asked Lady Elihan's forgiveness for the fact that the Archduke had misunderstood everything a little. The girl then bowed to Lady Elihan and then formally introduced herself. Lady Elihan accepted Lady Daphne's apology and words, and then responded by giving her name. Luna looked at Sally for an indecently long time and silently, which gave her a strange feeling. Lady Daphne felt that she did not belong there, so she turned to her companion. She noted that the Archduke and Lady Elihan had much to talk about, so she would be the first to return to the estate today. Lukalina thanked Lady Daphne for her sensitivity and noted that she had exactly what to talk about with Ben. Sally felt uneasy leaving them alone, but being with them felt strange too. Ben watched as Sally politely said goodbye and couldn't decide whether to stay with Luna or try to stop his beloved. A happy moon turned to Ben and said that he was hard to get, but only saw her childhood friend running after the departing girl. Alarmed, Venelucia grabbed Sally by the hand and asked where she was heading alone. He didn't understand what Sally was going through, but he was very afraid of losing her again, so he grabbed the girl in a tight hug right in front of Luna. While a worried Ben was worried about Sally and trying to understand why the girl ran away from him every time, Luna stood behind. Lukalina was so angry and offended that she clenched her fist so as not to do or say anything unnecessary. And Sally was very surprised. She never expected that his lordship would prefer her to his childhood friend in such a situation. Lady Daphne couldn't believe her eyes when Venelucia stood before her and asked if she would really leave him and go away like that. Sally tried to pull her hand away, but the Archduke unconsciously squeezed it tighter to hold his beloved. His lordship squeezed Sally's hand so hard that the girl winced in pain and made a thin sound. The Archduke was very frightened and then loosened his grip a little and apologized for not noticing that he had squeezed her hand so tightly. His lordship was so worried that he told them to go as quickly as possible to the priestess for treatment. While Sally tried to calm his lordship and explain that she was okay, Lukalina couldn't believe her eyes, that her childhood friend wasn't paying any attention to her. Losing control of herself, Lukalina called Ben by name and asked what he was doing. She began to blame the Archduke for the fact that she returned after 11 years, and they did not really talk, and even then Ben behaved so coldly towards her. In fact, Sally could not even imagine that Venelucia, who had recently fled to Lukalina, would behave in such a way. Sally decided that she couldn't stay here any longer, given the atmosphere, so she decided to let his lordship handle things himself. She gently touched the Archduke's shoulder to get his attention and informed him that there was no need to worry about her. Then she forced a smile and told his lordship to speak with Lady Elihan first, and they would order the dress a little later. Then Lady Daphne turned and walked away with apologies. The Archduke looked at the back of his beloved, who was leaving. He again did not want to let her go and was already heading towards her to stop her. However, Luculina suddenly grabbed Ben by the arm and said that she urgently needed to talk to him about something. Luculina didn't beat around the bush and told him straight out that he should marry her after the welcoming banquet. Sally, who had not yet left the studio, heard Luculin Elihan's proposal. Darkness and shock overwhelmed her, so the girl stopped for a moment. But then Sally pulled herself together and forced herself to leave the room where Venelucia and Luculina remained. Venelucia was so shocked that he thought he had heard something wrong, so he asked Luna what she was talking about. Seeing Ben's reaction, Luna was shocked. She couldn't believe that he didn't want this. Venelucia turned his head away from the girl and asked why Luna was suddenly saying such words here. His lordship looked anxiously at the front door, fearing that Sally might have heard her proposal. Sally walked as if in a fog, she thought with pain that the meeting of Luna and Ben in the studio was not a coincidence. The daughter of the Daphne family realized that every time she changed the plot, the events of the story began to unfold faster and faster. Sally got into the carriage with deep anxiety. She did not understand what she should do now. The carriage door slammed with particular force, and Sally wondered what she needed to do to survive in this stream. Cornelia Daphne burst back into the manor in a carriage, worried that she had failed to stop Luna from confessing to Ben. Sally was worried about what the Archduke and Luculina were doing now, and whether the Emperor already knew about this confession. Sally was afraid that if the Emperor already knew about the current situation, he could now force her to take the place of Empress. Sally imagined the Emperor's gaze and was sure that he would definitely come to her today. Sally's face was blank, and it seemed like she didn't even have the strength to worry. She adjusted her collar and thought that the carriage was surprisingly stuffy. Suddenly, Sally felt the carriage door open and turned her head to see who was bothering her. The coachman apologized to the lady for the intrusion and said that he was worried because she had not left the carriage for too long. Cornelia's eyes began to blur, but she noticed that it was not the coachman who opened the door, but a woman with red hair. From intense anxiety and stuffiness, Sally lost consciousness, frightening all the servants. Sally, who had long since lost contact between her thoughts and her body, could not understand why she suddenly fainted. The servants were so worried about Lady Daphne's life that they ordered the priestess to be called immediately. Sally slowly began to open her eyes and regain consciousness, finding herself already lying in bed. The first person she saw was the Archduke, who was sitting next to her and was very frightened for the condition of his beloved. Sally asked what she was doing in his lordship's bed, as if forgetting everything that had happened earlier. His lordship reminded Sally that she was riding in his carriage, so the coachman took the girl to the Archduke's mansion. Sally remembered everything that had happened and thought that the maid who opened the carriage door was a stranger to her. Sally sat down on the bed and said that she was all right now, and then thanked his lordship for his concern. Venelucia looked sad and worried, but did not respond to Sally's words. Unable to resist, his lordship asked Sally if the girl had anything she could not tell him or ask him. Venelucia asked if the daughter of the Daphne family was hiding anything from him. While Sally could not understand what his lordship was talking about, the Archduke could not get the priest's words out of his head. It turns out that Sally is not sick in body, it is her soul that suffers. His lordship was sure that it was his fault that Sally was suffering so much, since his indecision had caused such great pain to the girl and her family. The Archduke blamed himself and claimed that he should not have done so. Feeling a strong sense of guilt towards Sally, he asked the girl if he should just let her go. Sally could not believe the words that His Serene Highness the Archduke spoke. Sally understood what his words were about, so she asked if the Archduke's words meant he wanted to break up with her. The Archduke, who was still worried about Sally's health, asked the girl not to jump to conclusions and not to misunderstand him. His lordship told Sally that after the girl heard Luna's confession and left the room, Venelucia refused Lady Ilihan. Venelucia admitted that he told his childhood friend that he loved another girl, so he could not accept her proposal. Sally thought about Venelucia's confession being repeated, but it wasn't enough for her. Sally knew that now was the best time to put an end to their relationship. Selly apologized to the Archduke for no longer believing his words and added that if he needed her, he must prove it with actions. And until he shows his actions, she cannot respond to his words of love. Selly was about to get out of bed, but the Archduke wanted to stop her and continue the dialogue. His lordship grabbed Selly's hand sharply and asked her forgiveness for making her worry. The man asked Selly with pain not to overexert herself because of him. Selly admitted that she had no doubt about his sincerity, but she still had no confidence in him. Selly looked straight into the Archduke's eyes from bottom to top and then confidently asked his lordship to leave. The Archduke was offended but did not object. He took a few steps and headed towards the exit of the room. Before leaving, he closed the curtains, saying that he would leave, but Selly could only leave after she recovered. He asked sadly to do at least this for the girl, to which she responded with silence. Already at the very door, his lordship heard Selly call him. Venelucia couldn't believe that Selly called him with such tenderness in her voice, so he turned around and looked at his beloved. Selly, who was sitting quietly in bed, thanked his lordship with all her heart for his concern. His lordship did not look happy at these words. On the contrary, he simply agreed with her with sadness. The next day, the servants helped Venelucia get ready, bringing his clothes to perfect condition. There was a knock at his bedroom door, and his lordship ordered him to enter. The butler greeted the Archduke, and Venelucia asked if Selly was awake. The butler informed his lordship that Lady Daphne had called for a carriage at dawn this morning and appeared to have returned to her townhouse. Venelucia, who was concerned about the condition of his beloved, asked how the girl felt. Hearing that Selly looked better than yesterday calmed him down a little, but told his servant that it was necessary to keep her at least until breakfast. Suddenly, a knight burst into the room, shouting and panicking, and announced that the emperor had nominated Lady Daphne as a candidate for the post of empress. Venelucia was completely furious at this news and could not believe that his older brother had done such a thing. The emperor, being in a good and happy mood, sat at his desk and sorted through documents. Suddenly he heard shouts coming from the corridor, in which he heard the words of the servants and his younger brother, who ordered all the servants to move away and not interfere. Venelucia burst into the room where the emperor was sitting, opening both doors completely. His Serene Highness the Archduke was furious and burning with rage. The emperor did not show any sign of it, but only asked with a satisfied smile what had angered his younger brother so much. The Archduke clenched his fists as he understood that his elder brother had deliberately spread the rumors to test his reaction. Venelucia was angered by the fact that his older brother pretended not to understand or know anything. The emperor was displeased that his lordship was silently walking straight towards him and ignoring him, so he addressed him by his title in the hope of bringing his brother to his senses. Moreover, the emperor was astonished that Archduke Afron dared to release an aura right in front of him. Venelucia reminded himself that he needed to calm down first and not give in to emotions. Taking control of his emotions, Venelucia told his brother that he had heard him nominate Senelia Daphne as a candidate for the post of empress. The emperor confirmed that these were not just rumors, but that he had actually nominated the girl. The emperor noted that Senelia had the prudence befitting an empress, and she was also from a family far from power, so she was the most suitable for the post of empress in this situation. Unable to believe what he had heard, Venelucia reminded him that Selly had been his lover for 6 years, and that this would ruin the reputation of the imperial family. The emperor urged his younger brother to be at least a little more honest now. Ben couldn't believe his older brother was telling him to admit that he loved Senelia Daphne. The emperor smiled like a child and asked his younger brother if he didn't think that he would find out about everything. The emperor reminded him that he had told his younger brother to stay away from Lady Elihan, but he had not listened, so the older brother could only begin to manipulate Lady Daphne. The emperor looked at the Archduke with disdain and thought only that his younger brother did not even know that all this had been planned from the very beginning for his sake. Pleased with himself, the emperor asked with a grin how the girl was going to pay for not following the order. Selly, with her head bowed low, confirmed that, as the emperor said, she had committed a sin by failing to prevent Lady Elihan from confessing her feelings and proposing to his lordship. The emperor acknowledged that Seli had committed a crime and, according to the law, must be punished. However, Seli did not plan to give up. She turned to the emperor with a request to give her one last chance. The daughter of the Daphne family looked at the emperor with confidence and without a shadow of a doubt. The emperor looked at Seli with a smile and asked again what last chance they were talking about. Seli asked the emperor with all sincerity to include her in the list of candidates for the post of empress. The emperor was very, very pleased with the proposal of the daughter of the Daphne family and was pleasantly impressed. He thought that Selenia had learned the right lesson and had taken the idea from that incident with young Lord Pendragon into her mind. However, he asked quite calmly and with slight bewilderment why he should include her in the list of candidates for the post of empress. Seli confessed that his lordship and Lady Elihan were bound by the threads of fate destined for them by the gods, and in Seli's opinion, it will take even greater human willpower to stop these two. Seli told the emperor that the archduke thought he could have her at any moment, and in fact he did, because Seli had no other choice. Seli noted that even if she agreed and married His Serene Highness the Archduke. However, it is unknown when his lordship will run away to Lady Elihan again, so Seli and the emperor have no guarantee that Lady Daphne will become the weakness of Venelucia, in whose video the emperor wants to see the girl. But Seli assured that a guarantee could appear if the emperor chose Senelia Daphne as a candidate for empress. Seli told the emperor that the moment she, who had rejected His Highness, became the emperor's wife, her value in the eyes of the Archduke would increase. Seli wanted to say that His Serene Highness the Archduke would lose his composure at that very moment, but the emperor interrupted the girl. As if reading the girl's thoughts, the emperor finished the sentence for her, adding that in this way His Highness would ask the emperor to issue a decree obliging him to accept Seli as Archduchess. The emperor asked Senelia if he should have a love fight with his brother for her sake, but the girl only replied that her mind could not comprehend the will of the son. Then Seli added that there were not many young ladies of the same age as the emperor, and also from noble families, but far from power. Seli remembered the emperor's proposal and asked if these were the reasons why he had proposed to her earlier. The emperor thought about the girl's words, especially when she emphasized that if His Highness were to bring up the same arguments to His Serene Highness, the Archduke would not be able to object. The emperor asked Seli with particular interest what would happen if his younger brother did not do as the girl said. Seli clenched her fists and said that in this case she would become empress, as the emperor wanted. And if this doesn't work, then she will, at the cost of her life, disrupt the decree on the selection of the empress. The emperor was pleased with Senelia's answer, so he said that since his obedient dog was ready to sacrifice even its own life, then he, as the owner, must give his consent. The emperor gave his consent to Senelia Daphne's proposal to be added to the list of candidates for the role of empress. But he noted that if Venelucia did not behave as he expected, then her punishment would depend entirely on him. The emperor also said that he did not intend to discuss any more second chances. Returning to reality, the emperor heard the cherished words from the Archduke, who asked if his elder brother remembered the promise that the emperor had given him in the event of the Archduke's return from the war. Venelucia reminded the emperor that he had promised to fulfill one wish of his lordship, in addition to granting the right to the throne. The emperor watched his younger brother with interest and agreed that he remembered such a promise. The emperor remembered how on the day he sent his younger brother to war during a game of chess, Venelucia smiled and said that if he used his wish correctly, his older brother would never be able to kill him. Venelucia was willing to give up his own safety for Seli's sake. Rather than allow Seli to live unhappily next to her older brother, Venelucia believed it was better to keep the girl by his side. The Archduke said that he now wanted to take advantage of the wish he had received the day before leaving for war. The Archduke wished the Emperor to issue a decree that His Highness accepted Lady Senelia Daphne as his Archduchess. The Emperor was pleased with the situation and his younger brother's request, so he said that he would fulfill this request. In the townhouse, Daphne Seli had everything sent back. The upset maid asked her mistress to accept the gift, because if his lordship had been sending her various gifts for a week now, and if she refused now, he would order it to be left right in the carriage. The maid reminded him that the mistress had agreed to be his partner at the banquet, but Sally ordered the maid to stop. Sally reminded him rather rudely that the housekeeper should not worry about her partner at the banquet. After thinking for a moment, Sally said to put in a corner the gift that the Archduke had sent her this time. All this time, Sally stood and looked out the window. It seemed that there was something there that the girl could not tear her eyes away from. There was a carriage standing under the window, and next to it was the Archduke, who obediently waited for the maid to give him some kind of answer. Sally looked out the window and thought about how the welcoming banquet for Lukalina Elihan had actually been cancelled. Emperor Clifford announced that he would hold a victory banquet at his imperial palace. Lukalina could not refuse, since an imperial decree had been issued, within the framework of which the banquet combined the return of Lukalina and the victory in the war. Among the knights participating in the campaign, who were also invited to the banquet, there were many commoners, so it was difficult for them to observe aristocratic rules. Thanks to this house, Sally was able to calmly enter the banquet hall without a partner. All the guests seemed to be whispering and discussing Sally and the Archduke, who called the girl by name as soon as he saw her at the banquet. His lordship approached his beloved and invited her to dance. A wave of gossip immediately swept through the hall that His Grace the Archduke had asked Lady Daphne to dance with such speed that the Emperor, who was standing to the side, heard them. The Emperor smiled and seemed pleased with everything that was happening, so the gossip returned from him to the couple of the Archduke and Sally with the words that apparently His Highness approved of this relationship. Sally accepted his lordship's invitation and offered him her hand, agreeing to dance. The couple began to dance to pleasant music, and the Archduke could not tear his loving gaze away from his partner. Sally saw Lukalina, who was watching them with surprise, and decided that from such a distance she would definitely hear everything. Sally turned to his lordship and asked him to explain what was happening now. Venelucia, who suspected nothing, answered with all sincerity that he was holding Sally so that she would not run away and would always remain close to him. Sally reminded his lordship that she had previously rejected the Archduke's proposal. But Venelucia only joyfully twirled Sally around in a dance and reminded her of his words about how he had to prove his love to her with his actions, which is what he was doing now. Sally was shocked by this turn of events and did not expect to hear words of recognition from the Archduke in front of everyone. The Archduke came too close to Sally's face and promised to marry her and love her until death do them part. Sally wanted to say something, but all the words flew out of her head. And lo and behold, the music stopped at that very moment when Sally was confused and didn't know what to do next. Venelucia did not want to take a break from the girl and looked at her tenderly, but their pleasant time was interrupted by a female voice. Venelucia turned to look at the girl who called him by his childhood nickname. His childhood friend Luna was walking towards Venelucci, smiling kindly at him and pretending that a couple of minutes ago she had not been furious about his confession of love for another. The first thing the Archduke did was look at his partner, with whom he had just danced, to understand what to do next. Then he gently took Sally's hand and asked her to stay next to him. Luna sat down and, in keeping with etiquette, formally invited His Serene Highness Archduke Afron to dance. The girl looked so tenderly at her childhood friend and radiated confidence that he would certainly agree to dance with her. His Serene Highness the Archduke was struck and surprised by Luna's invitation. He was again at a loss and did not know what to do next. Because of this awkward picture, rumours once again spread through the hall that Lady Elihan had asked his lordship to dance, although he was with Lady Daphne. Sally didn't want to be part of the rumours any longer, so she pulled her hand away from the Archduke's, then turned around and walked away from them without saying a word. The Archduke wanted to immediately follow his beloved, but a question from his childhood friend made him stop. Luna couldn't believe that Ben could refuse her, so she asked if he would really do it now. Luna began to play on his pity and said that if Ben refused her, her reputation would be destroyed. In high society, it was still customary for a man to be the first to invite a lady to dance. Of course, there were cases when a lady was the first to invite a gentleman to dance, but such a gesture was always based on the confidence that the man would not refuse. Venelucia understood that to refuse a lady in such a case was tantamount to wanting to humiliate her. Unable to refuse his childhood friend who had done so much for him, his lordship agreed to dance. Lukalina Elihan noticed that Ben was too quiet and sullen, so she asked if he was angry. Venelucia didn't put on his mask and asked Luna if she really thought he should be in a good mood now. Luna, hurt, reflexively squeezed Ben's shoulder a little harder and asked if he really needed to say that now. Luna reminded Venelucia that when, due to the Emperor's intrigues, he was sent to war, she soon went there too. Luna remembered how she had been supported during the war by letters from Ben, in which he wrote that his feelings for her would never change, and he would love her forever. Luna came very close to Ben and accused him of the fact that the only thing that allowed her to last 11 years in the war was his feelings for her, and now he claims that he is in love with another. Ben didn't know what to answer, so he just remained sadly silent and looked straight ahead. It was at that moment that his attention wandered from the words of his childhood friend to something more exciting. He saw young Lord Pendragon walking with 2 glasses of champagne in the same direction where Selly should have been. Venelucia took a closer look at the place where this annoying guy had tensed up, and in the end he saw the lonely silhouette of his beloved, who was standing with her back to him. His Grace the Archduke was furious when he found that young Lord Pendragon was heading straight for Selly. He immediately stopped dancing and turned to his childhood friend, who at that very moment was about to tell him something. Venelucia released Luna's hands from his and said sadly that no matter what, he couldn't do that. His lordship told Luna right in front of everyone at the ball that he could not spend his whole life with her just because of a feeling of guilt. Luna was shocked and taken aback by her childhood friend's statement, but quickly pulled herself together. She asked Venelucia directly if he thought that everything that happened between them was only because of his feelings of guilt. Venelucia did not answer this question, but only apologized and said that he would leave first and then headed towards where Selly and Pendragon were. Luna was left alone in the middle of the hall, and the guests' glances and whispers were directed at her. At the same time, Luna was as if under hypnosis. She told the departed Ben that this was impossible, since they were both connected by the threads of fate. Lady Elihan was completely convinced that she and Ben would definitely be together. But the Archduke no longer heard her. He walked along the lonely corridors of the palace in search of his beloved and that annoying guy. His lordship wandered alone and then realized that he was somewhere near them. He heard some conversations, so he stopped abruptly and looked away. Venelucia saw young Lord Pendragon handing Lady Daphne a glass of champagne, and there was no one near them. His lordship looked at the face of this upstart and became angry with him for daring to approach his beloved. As he came closer, his lordship could hear young Lord Pendragon telling Selly that he had brought champagne in case she wanted a drink. Venelucia seemed to be unable to contain himself any longer as he clenched his fists with hatred and began to recall the 2 incidents. The first time he hated him was when Yenneloff Pendragon came to the imperial banquet as Selly's partner. The second time the Archduke had to restrain himself from killing him was when he was courting Selly during the funeral of Viscount Daphne. His lordship couldn't understand why the hell this guy was still hanging around his Selly. Selly thanked Yenneloff Pendragon for being so considerate and added with a slight smile on her face that she was just about to have a drink. His lordship became furious, quickly ran up to the standing couple and snatched the glass from Yenneloff Pendragon's hands. His lordship turned to Pendragon and accused him of being a very slow-witted young lord. Then Venelucia threw the glass on the floor, causing the crystal to break and all the liquid to leak out. Selly was amazed. She did not expect that His Grace the Archduke would be jealous of her, but she stood aside and watched what was happening. Venelucia came closer to the young Lord Pendragon and said that he had previously made it clear that he should not hang around Senelia. Selly didn't even understand what was happening because just a few moments ago she was walking alone through the corridors of the imperial palace in sad feelings. The girl was deeply immersed in her thoughts and worries about her haste to leave his lordship. The image of how Luna had brazenly invited his lordship to dance without giving him a chance to refuse kept flashing before her eyes. While Sally thought that she had relaxed a lot and did not expect such active behavior from Luna, someone's voice called her name. The voice that called her belonged to the young Lord Pendragon. She realized this when she turned around and saw the man. Sally asked him with slight disgust why he was approaching her, but the young boy hastened to inform her that he had come with good intentions. He then handed her a glass of champagne, saying that he thought she might want a drink. The daughter of the Daphne family looked at the glass for a while and did not dare to take it from the hands of the Emperor's henchmen. Although their last meeting was not a pleasant one, they are both eventually bound by the Emperor's shackles. These thoughts gave Sally a feeling of comradeship in misfortune, so she decided to accept the glass from the hands of young Lord Pendragon. The young Lord Pendragon laughed a little childishly and asked if it was in vain that he interfered in her loneliness. The daughter of the Daphne family extended her hand in hopes of taking the glass of drink, saying that she was just thirsty. But to her surprise, His Serene Highness the Archduke intervened in their idyll of silence and relaxed, friendly atmosphere. Sally was very surprised by his appearance, but she was even more surprised by his behavior. She was amazed at the way his lordship addressed young Lord Pendragon, calling him to his face a slow-witted man. The imperial corridor no longer seemed lonely, but rather filled with a heavy atmosphere, with the Archduke wanting to trample the young Lord Pendragon on the spot. Yennefer Pendragon was hurt by the words and irritated by his lordship's appearance at the most inopportune moment. Realizing that he was standing in front of a person of higher status, and also the Emperor's own younger brother, Yennefer Pendragon did not get into an active conflict, but apologized to Lady Daphne for disturbing her. After which the man turned around and left his lordship and Lady Daphne alone. Yennefer Pendragon walked through the lonely corridors of the Imperial Palace with a strong feeling of resentment and disappointment. Venelucia turned to Sally and wanted to ask something, but the daughter of the Daphne family stopped him with a stern tone of her voice. The heiress of the House of Daphne scolded his lordship for exploiting his status and interfering in other people's personal dialogues, which, in the girl's opinion, was quite impolite. The Archduke was offended to hear this from his beloved, so he asked what kind of personal dialogue they were talking about. Sally understood that it was painful for him to hear this, but she could not do anything, so she asked if he was not a stranger, then who was his lordship to her? The Archduke did not take offence or get angry. Instead, he gently took the girl's hands and added that he knew her better than anyone. Then Venelucia gently kissed Sally's fingertips and confessed that he was the only one who could give her the best. Venelucia looked at Sally with a challenge and a dark gaze, and then added that he was the only one who could make the girl happy, and with a slight flirtation asked if he was really a stranger to her. Sally looked at his lordship in silence. She was not at all taken in by his depraved speeches, but she did not argue either. The heiress of the House of Daphne only pulled her hand away from Venelucci and said that all his words did not change the fact that his lordship was rude and impolite. At that moment, the Archduke really felt offended. He was hurt by his beloved's coldness. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't hide his hurt when he asked why Sally kept rejecting him. Sally said some pretty harsh words about how she didn't love His Serene Highness the Archduke. While the Archduke could not believe Sally's words, she asked him again what was wrong. Sally reminded his lordship that he had originally used her to hide the truth from the Emperor and had not wanted any love from her, which was what the girl had eventually given him. The Archduke entered the argument and reminded that he had already told Sally that this was not so, and as proof of his sincerity, he wanted to arrange the most luxurious wedding. Sally noted that she took his words simply as a verbal promise to hold the wedding and nothing more. At these words, the Archduke fell silent. He did not understand what he should say at that moment, what he needed to do to prove his sincerity. Sally said goodbye to his lordship, and as she left, she thought that he was still the same stupid and arrogant man. Most likely, the Archduke was sure that if he confessed his love to Sally, she would back down and surrender to him. But instead, Lady Daphne became someone who was hard to get. Sally wanted his lordship to prove his love to her, and not to take advantage of the Emperor's order and his power. The Archduke could not retreat. He was afraid of losing Sally again, so he extended his palm to the girl. He gently hugged the girl from behind and in the most affectionate voice called the girl by name, and from surprise, Sally lost touch with reality. His lordship whispered in Sally's ear the confession that he would never meet anyone sincerely except her. Then the man turned the girl's body towards himself and pressed her closer, and then asked his beloved not to run away from him anymore. A moment later, Sally found the strength to answer his lordship and said that she never ran away. Then the Archduke's beloved confessed to him that she was worried that His Highness would run away from her. At these words, before Selly's eyes was not Venelucia, but the image of Lady Elihan, with whom his lordship was connected by the threads of fate. Upon learning the reason for Selly's concern, the man replied that they both had nowhere to run. Then he uttered words that he would have been better off not saying, but nevertheless confessed that the Emperor had already issued an order to marry her. However, hearing these words, Sally felt joy, as her efforts were not in vain. While the Archduke held Sally in a tight embrace and asked her forgiveness, the girl stood motionless, but with a feeling of satisfaction. Squeezing Sally tighter and tighter, Venelucia explained that they needed to prepare for the proposal as expected. However, he sincerely asked his beloved to endure his love. Sally silently responded to the Archduke's strong embrace, but in her mind she thought that she had no other choice. Sally hugged the Archduke and knew she was on her way to surviving this terrible affair. From that day on, Venelucia provided Sally with the Archduchess's quarters in the Affron mansion, and preparations for the wedding were in full swing. The Archduke approached Madame Lanfador with a piece of white fabric and announced that he wanted to use it for Sally's wedding dress. Madame Lanfador was a young woman who was a court model for the imperial family. While Sally was being measured, she watched as Madame Lanfador admired his lordship's refined taste. However, the girl's thoughts were far from this event. She thought with relief that the marriage with Venelucia, sealed by an imperial order, was finally decided. Since then, the Emperor has never contacted Sally, which is why the girl's morale has improved, her sleep has become stronger, and her appetite has increased. However, for some unknown reason, the girl began to feel a strong sense of anxiety. Just at that moment, his lordship's servant burst into the room and urgently called the Archduke. The knight reported that the Emperor had issued an urgent order for his lordship to appear at the imperial palace. Sally couldn't understand why it was so sudden and what could have happened, but just in case she started looking around. At that moment, Sally saw in the window a raven with red eyes, which the Emperor loved to transform into. Sally paced the room, wondering why Emperor Clifford had called Ben to see him. Sally was completely unable to predict the reason for his actions, which made the girl even more anxious. Suddenly, black smoke appeared from the window, which seemed ominously familiar to the girl. The Archduke's bride flinched slightly in surprise and reflexively moved to the side. In front of her stood Emperor Clifford's Shadow Knight, who was covered in a black robe and had a black mask covering his face. Sally began to panic and look around, blaming the Shadow Knight for the possibility of them being replaced. However, the Shadow Knight remained completely calm and only called her by her title. The Shadow Knight conveyed the Emperor's order, calling on Lady Daphne to come to the Imperial Palace immediately without anyone knowing. Having conveyed the order, the Shadow Knight disappeared, and Sally could not understand how she could come to the Emperor right now, at such a time, and even unnoticed. Sally's anxiety, which had not been evident until recently, took on new colours. Having overcome her anxiety and doubts, Sally decided to quietly leave the Archduke's mansion and head to meet the Emperor. Right at the gate stood an unfamiliar man who turned around at the rustle. He noticed a girl in a black robe and asked if it was Lady Daphne. Sally looked at the man with a gaze slightly clouded with anxiety and fear. The girl used magic and ordered the guard that he had not seen her today. Hypnosis hit the mark, and the man's consciousness changed the picture he saw. Having completed her task, Sally continued on her way to the Imperial Palace, bypassing all obstacles. She opened the gate and quietly walked out onto the streets of the capital. Sally walked to the palace in the dark night. Having reached the Imperial Palace, Sally could not even enjoy its magnificence and beauty. She immediately went to meet the Emperor, who smiled with all his heart and was happy to see them. Selly greeted Emperor Clifford according to etiquette. The Emperor did not respond to the polite greeting and invited them to come closer to him. Selly was alarmed by how pleased the Emperor was, and her anxiety was making itself felt again. In the end, Selly decided that she could not refuse His Highness and began to take steps in his direction. The Emperor could not stand it any longer and ordered the girl to quickly look at the ball that stood in front of him on the table. What she saw struck the girl so much that her eyes widened. The ball showed Lukalina Elihan and Venelucia Afron lying on the floor of the cave completely unconscious. Selly thought with horror that this was the work of Clifford, who had promised at least not to kill his younger brother. Selly put a smile on her face and asked His Highness if he would like to enlighten his dim-witted servant about his plans and explain what kind of situation was reflected in the cave. The Emperor began to tap his finger on the table and reminded that the hunting festival would be taking place very soon. The hunting festival was a celebration that took place in the Empire once a year. During this very period, when the monsters are most active and multiplying, entry and exit are strictly controlled by a magical barrier curtain. At such a moment, the Imperial Order goes out in advance to hunt and exterminate all the monsters. The Emperor confessed that this time he sent Lady Elihan to exterminate the monsters, but unfortunately, due to an accident, the entrance to the Mana Cave collapsed. Selly remembered that the Mana Cave was known for containing Mana Stones, which allowed wizards to fully manifest their powers. Mana Stones are also durable and cannot be destroyed by regular magic or aura, making it an even more difficult material to obtain, and to be stuck in a cave like that. Selly realized that Emperor Clifford had deliberately lured Lady Elihan into that cave. After all, in order to save Luna, Ben had to go there, and because of the Swordmaster's power, his lordship would unknowingly cause another collapse and lock them both in. While Selly was wondering why the Emperor needed all this, Clifford spoke sharply and admitted that he had thought of something. The Emperor, with a smile on his face, admitted that since these two were destined to be together, wouldn't it be easier to kill them? These words made Selly feel uneasy. She clenched her teeth in anger and frustration. The Emperor noted that in that case, Selly would not have to worry when Ben returned to Luna, and so she could be free. Selly was so angry at all these lies that she clenched her fists, because if it were true, he would not have ordered the girl to kill them earlier. Selly quickly pulled herself together, then unclenched her fists and let out a quiet breath. The heiress of the Daphne family obediently asked the Emperor what he wanted Selly to do. The Emperor challenged Selly to use her abilities to save Lukalina and Venelucia. These words pierced Selly's heart. She understood what kind of game Emperor Clifford was playing. The Emperor, in order to learn Selly's abilities as a Korakian Thorn, abandoned his brother to certain death. The heiress of the House of Daphne understood that in this situation, pretending that she knew nothing made no sense. Selly merely bowed obediently and said that she obeyed the order of His Highness the Emperor. Emperor Clifford and Lady Daphne came to the Mana Cave, where Lady Elihan and Archduke Afron were located. Selly looked at the boulders and thought that Luna and Ben were behind these walls. Selly confidently reached out her hand to one of the stones and touched the wall. The girl silently ordered to let her in, and a turquoise aura appeared next to her. Selly's ability was to cast spells in Korean, and it was an ability that all magicians dreamed of having because it was easy. Emperor Clifford was amazed to see the power of Selly's spell. The reason the price of spells was so high was because of their rarity. If the body did not have a special structure that allowed it to be used as a vessel, absorb mana, process it, and release it outward, then it was impossible to use magic. The magic caster was a kind of chosen one who could use magic without much effort. Since Selly's strength was not great, she was only able to create a very small gap in the wall of boulders. Moreover, even such a small space was enough for the girl to crawl inside the cave, albeit with difficulty. Selly found herself inside the Mana Cave and walked through the bright space illuminated by the Mana Stones. Selly walked with difficulty and tried to hurry, because if you stay near high-density Mana Stones for a long time, your body will begin to spontaneously absorb mana, and an overload will occur. A moment later, Selly saw Lady Elihan and her lover lying on the ground. Seeing Venelucci lying unconscious alive was hard and painful for Lady Daphne. Sally ran to her lover and checked his condition. Lady Daphne noted with relief that fortunately her lover was not seriously injured, and if she could stop the bleeding, he would somehow pull through. Sally spoke the word healing, and a huge magical field formed around her and Ben, which began to heal his lordship. Due to the power of the mana stones and the frequent use of her power, Sally began to cough up blood. Her consciousness began to become cloudy, and everything swam before her eyes. She thought sadly that her body was becoming overloaded. Sally gripped the stone tightly in her hands and willed herself to pull herself together. Just as Lady Daphne was beginning to think that if she were to lose consciousness now, they would all die, his lover called her by her pet name. Sally, who was already losing touch with reality, asked if it was the Archduke calling her. His Grace the Archduke began to regain consciousness and asked how Sally came to be there. His lordship finally came to his senses when he saw that his beloved had lost consciousness and was beginning to faint right before his eyes. He suddenly came to his senses, grabbed the girl in his arms, saving her from falling, and in a panic shouted her name in the hope that Sally would hear him and come to her senses. All the heroes got out of the mana cave, and Sally and Veneluccia were already in their mansion. Veneluccia sat there, exhausted, with his head down and his hands covering it, and then asked his beloved why she had done such a reckless thing. Sally just watched in silence as His Grace the Archduke scolded her and reproached her for the fact that she too could have ended up locked in the cave if he had not come to his senses. However, Sally also had a lot of questions for him, such as why he even went there. But instead, Sally only asked if everything was all right with his lordship and Lady Elihan. However, his lordship reproached Sally for not being bothered by others, since she had suffered so much from walking on the stones with bare feet. Out of helplessness, the Archduke again lowered his head onto his knees and covered them with his hands, sadly thinking that he had never thought that she could not take care of herself so much. Hearing Sally's words of apology, the Archduke shuddered a little. He raised his head and looked at Sally, who was sitting on the bed in front of him, with great calm. Veneluccia gently covered Sally's hand with his own and said that he was angry with her, not because he wanted to hear an apology. He admitted that he was the only one to blame for the fact that she suffered. Veneluccia told Sally that she had a mana overload, but when her body recovered enough to accept divine power, he would call the priest. Then Veneluccia stood up and added that although he didn't know the reasons why Sally had been hiding the fact that she was a sorceress all this time, however, he is on her side and is sure that Sally had reasons to hide her abilities. Veneluccia left the room, leaving his beloved to rest in the Archduchess's room. Sally thought sadly that Veneluccia had finally found out about her ability and clenched her little fists in excitement. Sally began to fear his reaction and the possibility that he would ever find out that she was Emperor Clifford's puppet. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard from the street, which attracted the attention of the exhausted girl. After thinking for a moment, Sally recognized the sound of the trumpet, which she associated with the Emperor. Veneluccia met his older brother and said with slight surprise that he had been wondering why he had come. Veneluccia asked with displeasure if his elder brother had come to take his beloved to the imperial palace as a sorcerer. The emperor quite noted that the existence of a magic caster is the most important human resource that belongs to the empire, so this is quite natural. Veneluccia objected to his brother, reminding him that Sally was an archduchess, and no matter how important a magic caster was to the empire, she could not be taken away so easily. The emperor laughed and said that of course the archduchess could not be taken away, and then noted that Lady Daphne was not yet married, so she was not an archduchess. Veneluccia reminded his brother with resentment that he had previously issued an order, so very soon Sally would marry him. The dialogue between the two brothers was interrupted by a servant who informed the emperor that Lady Daphne had arrived to see them. The emperor ordered the heiress of the Daphne family to be let in, and the door of the room opened. Cornelia Daphne entered the room where the two brothers were arguing, leaning on a cane due to her poor health. The Archduke, who was very worried about his beloved, immediately approached Sally and reminded her that she was not allowed to move yet. Sally hastened to calm her lover, saying that she could already move and that she had come to greet His Highness the Emperor. The Emperor greeted Sally, noting that they had not seen each other for a long time, and asked the Archduke to step out for a moment and leave the two of them alone. The Archduke wanted to object and said to speak in his presence, but the Emperor made it clear with his look that it would be better for him to listen to his elder brother. The Emperor's expression frightened Sally, and she stopped for a moment and trembled. Worried about possible events, Lady Daphne turned to her lover and asked him to leave her and the Emperor for a moment to talk. In a panic, Sally called her lover by his childhood nickname, Ben, for the first time. Sally's provocation worked, and the Archduke made a displeased face because he could not resist her. His lordship clenched his fists in helplessness, but did not object or argue with the weak girl. His lordship gave in and, before leaving, asked Sally to shout if there was a knock. Venelucia left, and Sally remained standing, leaning on a large cane that held the girl of the fool. The Emperor laughed and doubled down that his younger brother had indeed said to shout. Clifford unpinned his gold brooch with the red crystal and pulled it slightly away from his collar towards his face. The Emperor created a field with the words that his younger brother's warnings were useless because the Archduke would hear nothing. Sally stood and watched the Emperor's actions as he released the magic from the stone. Emperor Clifford used anti-magic tools as Senelia Daphne expected. The Emperor suddenly approached Senelia and roughly grabbed Lady Daphne by the face. The Emperor spoke with particular cruelty when he said that he had already given Senelia a chance to show her abilities. After which the Emperor added that the girl understood perfectly well why he personally came to Afron's mansion today and ordered to break off the engagement with Venelucia. Sally was trembling with fear, but she found the strength to answer that she did not know how she would interfere with His Grace and Lady Elihan if she broke off her engagement with the Archduke. The Emperor hastened to reassure Sally, noting that his younger brother would be so busy hating Sally that he would have no time for a relationship with Luna. Sally hesitantly reminded the Emperor that she could not escape the marriage order issued by the Emperor. The Emperor noted with delight that Sally had behaved so intelligently, like an obedient dog, so now he could see how much effort she had actually put in. The Emperor squeezed Sally's mouth with particular cruelty, which made the girl truly scared. They started to knock on the door, and the Emperor noted that with the help of the Swordmaster's power, his brother seemed to have figured out the use of an anti-magic artifact. Clifford noted that his younger brother really loved her, but would this love be enough when he found out that Sally was the Emperor's saber? Sally plucked up her courage and asked what would happen if she personally told the Archduke that she had become close to him on the orders of the Emperor and His Highness would accept it. Sally asked if this would prove to His Highness that she was the perfect leash in his hands. Lady Daphne's words intrigued the Emperor, so he let go of the girl's face and asked what good she would be if his brother found out about everything. Sally suggested to the Emperor that he place a ban on her neck, which would prevent her from betraying His Highness, and the Archduke would not be able to find out about it. The Emperor asked if she planned to blackmail his younger brother using herself, and the girl obediently agreed. Sally noted that in this case he would be able to do whatever he wanted with her. From these words, the Emperor clearly understood that Sally was aware of her importance to him. The Emperor clicked his fingers and removed the magic that had been cast on the room earlier. Having gained access to the room where his beloved was locked, Ben immediately opened the door and burst inside. The first thing Venelucia saw was the Emperor putting his arm around Sally's shoulders, who was barely standing on her feet. The sight he saw filled His Serene Highness the Archduke with utter rage, which was reflected in his eyes. At this point, the Emperor whispered in Sally's ear that there was something he had not told the girl while he was blackmailing and playing with her. Clifford said to the whole room that he didn't know if Ben would forgive her if he found out that Lady Daphne had been his since that very first meeting with Venelucia. Hearing these words, Sally automatically looked at her lover, not having time to realize what was happening. The Emperor's fears that he was not sure whether Venelucia would accept Sally after learning the truth took on special significance when the girl looked at her lover's face. After the Emperor finished his game, there was a deathly silence in the room. The Archduke was the first to come to his senses and began to take a very slow step. Sally was frightened and afraid of the Archduke's reaction, as she could not predict it. However, Venelucia quickly approached his brother and beloved and tore Sally from the Emperor's hands, pulling her towards him. Venelucia reproached the Emperor that, despite the fact that he was His Highness, it was extremely impolite to approach his younger brother's bride so closely. The Emperor seemed surprised by the strength of his brother's love for Cornelia Daphne and smiled strangely. Clifford tried to ask if Ben had heard his words, but Venelucia abruptly and rudely interrupted his brother, saying that Sally belonged only to him. However, the Emperor had no plans to give up, so he asked again if Ben was sure he wanted to protect Cornelia Daphne, even after everything he had heard. Venelucia was losing his patience, so he turned to his brother. Venelucia only told his brother that Sally was his love. After these words, the Emperor confessed to his younger brother that he had sent Sally to become his leash, and the girl had done a perfect job. The Emperor praised the girl, noting that she had won today and wanted to call her by her childhood nickname. Venelucia harshly interrupted his brother and forbade him to call his beloved by the name of Sally, after which His Highness the Archduke asked as a command to leave immediately. The tone that Venelucia chose did not please Clifford very much, so he ordered his younger brother with special seriousness and warning not to be insolent to him. Emperor Clifford asked in all seriousness whether he needed to be reminded once again that the Archduke's life was in the hands of the Emperor. Venelucia clenched his fist to control his emotions and feelings, after which Venelucia released Sally and turned to his brother. Venelucia obediently bowed his head before his older brother, which left Sally in complete surprise. It seemed that even Emperor Clifford, who silently watched his younger brother's polite bow, was surprised by this submissive gesture, after which Venelucia said that he would personally escort His Highness to the exit. While Venelucia bowed his head to his elder brother, Clifford said that he did not need to be seen off. Before leaving the room and slamming the door, the Emperor noted that Sally and Ben had a lot to talk about. As soon as His Highness left, Ben immediately turned to his beloved and shouted her name with such force that the girl began to tremble. Sally was lost in her thoughts again, wondering if Venelucia realized what he had just done. After all, his lordship, with his actions, has just put a leash on himself. Sally wanted to say something, but Ben grabbed her into a tight hug and asked her not to say anything. The Archduke said that Sally would marry him as planned, no matter what. Venelucia asked the girl to remain silent, so a deathly silence fell over the room. His lordship helped Sally back into the Archduchess's room and sat her down on the spacious bed. Sally still didn't understand what was happening and was afraid that His Serene Highness the Archduke's reaction could change at any moment. The heiress of the House of Daphne carefully grabbed his lordship by the sleeve of his blouse and called him. Venelucia noted with resentment that even in such a situation, Sally continued to call him by his title. Then he turned to the girl and sadly asked if she had loved him even for a moment.